Hi guys, and welcome to Boring History Secrets channel. Tonight we begin in a place that feels instantly unfamiliar, even before you fully understand why. You step outside as daylight thins to a pale grey ribbon along the horizon, and winter in medieval England greets you without ceremony. The cold does not rush at you. It settles. It creeps into your boots, into your sleeves, into the quiet space between thoughts. There is no switch to flip, no lamp waiting by the door. Darkness arrives when it wants to, and you adjust because you must. You probably will not survive this, at least not comfortably, and that realization lands sooner than you expect. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you are settling in, let me know where you are listening from and what time it is there right now. Now, dim the lights. You pull your cloak tighter and immediately feel how little difference it makes. Wool helps, but it never seals. Air moves through it, cold and persistent, like a quiet animal testing every gap. This is the first lesson of winter here. Nothing fully shuts the cold out. It is not an enemy you defeat. It is a presence you negotiate with, hour by hour. The sky darkens fast. In summer, twilight lingers. In winter, it collapses. The sun slips away as if it has more important places to be. And suddenly your world shrinks. Not metaphorically. Literally. You can only move where you can see. And you can only see what fire or moonlight allows. A mainstream historical fact sits beneath this moment. Medieval England had no concept of public street lighting. Once the sun set, most towns and villages surrendered themselves to darkness, with only occasional torches or candles marking human activity. You hear sounds before you see shapes, footsteps on frozen earth, a cough, someone muttering a prayer. Not loudly, just enough to feel braver. Winter changes how people speak. Voices soften. Words are chosen more carefully. Sound carries farther in cold air. And you do not want to draw attention unless you mean to. There is a smell that follows you everywhere now. Smoke. Not the clean smell of a campfire, but thick, oily smoke that clings to hair and fabric. It leaks from doorways and roof vents, reminding you that inside every house, someone is fighting the same quiet battle against cold and dark. Fires exist. Yes, but they are never generous. They are guarded like temperamental animals. You reach the door of a house and pause, because even this simple act has weight. Opening the door means letting precious heat escape. Closing it too fast can stir smoke and make eyes sting. Winter teaches patience through irritation. Inside, the room is dim, lit by a single rushlight that barely pushes back the dark. The flame trembles, and you understand immediately that light here is fragile. It must be fed, trimmed, protected from drafts. Historians still argue whether medieval people experienced darkness as fear or simply as normal background. But standing here, you suspect the answer is both. The floor beneath your feet is hard-packed earth. Cold rises from it steadily, soaking into your soles. There is no insulation, no barrier. Benches line the wall. A table sits close to the hearth, not for comfort but for survival. Everyone wants to be near the fire, and not everyone can be. This creates an unspoken hierarchy that winter sharpens. Those closest to the hearth eat first, warm first, rest first. No one announces this. It is understood. A quirky detail slips into your awareness as you watch someone adjust the fire. They do not pile on wood. They do the opposite, pulling logs apart, spacing them carefully. A roaring fire is dangerous. Sparks can jump. Roof beams are dry. Entire villages have burned because someone chased warmth too eagerly. Winter warmth is cautious warmth. You sit, and the bench steals heat from your body immediately. You shift, instinctively curling inward. This posture is not accidental. Medieval bodies learned efficiency. Knees drawn up, arms tucked close, chin lowered, heat conserved without thinking about it. You notice that no one sprawls. Comfort is compact here. Outside, the wind picks up. You hear it push against walls, testing them. Timber houses flex slightly, whispering complaints. Stone houses feel colder still, holding winter inside their bones. There is debate among scholars about which structures felt warmer in winter, timber or stone. But your fingers tell you the answer changes from night to night. Time behaves differently now. Without clocks, evening stretches and compresses unpredictably. You judge it by hunger, by fatigue, by how often someone stirs the fire. Church bells may ring in the distance, marking canonical hours. But here inside, winter time is measured by endurance. You feel tired earlier than expected. Darkness pulls sleep forward, whether you want it or not. This is not laziness. It is biology adjusting to environment. Medieval winters demanded rest, not because people worked less, but because cold made every movement cost more energy. You sense that tomorrow will follow the same rhythm. Light, brief, work, compressed, darkness, long and intimate. As you settle deeper into the bench, smoke stinging your eyes just enough to keep you awake, you begin to understand that winter is not a season here. It is a condition. It shapes architecture, clothing, diet, conversation, and even thought. And this is only the first evening. The cold has not reached its worst yet. You listen to the fire crackle softly, not comforted, but accompanied, as winter claims another night. Morning does not arrive so much as it seeps in. You wake before you want to, not because you feel rested, but because the cold has finished whatever patience it had left during the night. Your eyes open to grey light filtering through gaps in the shutters, thin and uncertain. There is no alarm. There never is. Winter decides when the day begins, and today it begins reluctantly. You shift your legs and feel stiffness protest immediately. Sleep here is shallow, layered, interrupted by the need to turn, to pull fabric closer, to tuck fingers back into warmth. The bench you slept on has held the night cold faithfully. Wood does not forget. You sit up slowly, because moving too fast wastes heat, and that is something you are already short on. Daylight is currency now. Every task waits on it. In medieval England, the length of the day shrinks dramatically in winter, sometimes to barely 8 hours of usable light. That simple fact governs everything you are about to do. There is no concept of catching up later, once darkness falls. Work does not simply pause. It becomes impractical, dangerous, or both. You glance toward the hearth. The fire has collapsed into embers, glowing faintly, like tired eyes refusing to close. Someone will need to tend it soon, but not yet. Firewood is precious. Lighting the fire too early wastes fuel. Waiting too long wastes fingers. This balance becomes second nature. You kneel and warm your hands cautiously, rotating them slowly. One side, then the other, never too close. Burns heal poorly in winter. A mainstream historical reality hums quietly in the background of this morning. Medieval people organized their days around sunrise and sunset, not hours and minutes. The canonical hours marked by the church offered structure, but in winter, even these shifted subtly. Prime felt later. Vespers felt earlier. Time bent with the light. You step outside and immediately feel the difference. Cold air hits your lungs sharply, making you pause. The ground is hard, frozen in places, slick in others. Mud has turned deceptive. It looks solid until it is not. Travel paths are treacherous now, and even walking across the yard demands attention. You lower your center of gravity instinctively. Winter teaches balance. The sky is pale, Washed thin, the sun hangs low, already tired, as if conserving energy. You realize with a small tightening in your chest that this is all the daylight you will get today. No extension, no artificial brightness to stretch it. When the sun dips, your productive day ends whether you are ready or not. People begin to emerge from houses, moving with purpose. There is no lingering. Winter mornings compress motivation. Everyone knows what must be done, and there is little debate about it. Animals need feeding. Water needs hauling before it freezes solid. Tools need checking. Any mistake made now will be harder to fix later. When fingers go numb, you notice how sound carries. A hammer striking wood rings sharper. Voices travel farther. Even the scrape of boots on frost seems louder. There is a stillness underneath it all. A listening quality to the air. You become quieter without trying. Winter enforces courtesy through physics. A quirky detail slips into your awareness as you watch someone glance repeatedly at the sky. Cloud cover matters more than mood here. Clear skies mean colder nights. Clouds mean trapped warmth. People read weather with the seriousness of gamblers reading cards. A faint halo around the sun draws murmurs. Frost patterns on fences invite comment. This is not small talk. It is risk assessment. Work begins quickly. Indoors first. If possible. Spinning. Mending. Sharpening blades. Tasks that can be done near the fire are prioritized. Outdoor labor is saved for the brightest hours. You feel the pressure of time as a physical presence, nudging you forward. There is no wasted movement, no wandering. Even conversation serves a function, sharing information, confirming plans. Historians still debate how rigid medieval daily schedules truly were in winter. But standing here, you sense flexibility layered over necessity. People adapt. Yes, but always within narrow margins. Daylight is unforgiving. Miss it, and the cost comes later. By midday, the sun is already sliding downward. It feels unfair, like the day is ending just as your body warms enough to function properly. Hunger arrives earlier too. Cold burns calories relentlessly. Meals are timed not just for nourishment but for morale. Warm food changes everything. Even if it is thin, you gather inside again, drawn by the promise of heat and light. The room feels brighter now, not because the light is strong, but because your eyes have adjusted. The rushlight flickers steadily, its small flame casting exaggerated shadows. Faces look sharper, older, more serious in this light. Winter ages people subtly, season by season. There is a quiet understanding that once the sun drops, tasks narrow further. You will not begin anything new late in the day. You finish. You tidy. You prepare for darkness. Tools are put away carefully. Leaving something unfinished overnight invites trouble, because morning cold punishes laziness harshly. As afternoon fades, you notice fatigue settling in earlier than it should. This is not weakness. It is conservation. Bodies respond to light. And without it, they slow. Medieval winter sleep patterns often included longer nights and sometimes a wakeful period in the middle. A quiet stretch where people prayed, talked softly, or simply listened to the fire. The idea of 8 uninterrupted hours is a modern luxury. You glance toward the door again. Outside, shadows lengthen. The sun sinks low enough to distort depth, turning familiar paths unfamiliar. Someone calls out a reminder to finish up. It is not shouted. It does not need to be. Everyone feels the same urgency. A subtle emotional shift accompanies the fading light. The day closes in on itself, becoming intimate. There is relief in returning indoors. In retreating from exposure, winter encourages inwardness, not through philosophy, but through temperature. As you sit near the hearth again, rubbing your hands slowly, you understand that winter daylight is not just shorter, it is heavier. Every hour carries weight. Every decision echoes. Tomorrow we'll repeat this pattern with minor variations. And over weeks, your sense of time will change. Days blur. The rhythm becomes internal. You watch the last usable light disappear from the doorway and feel a strange mix of resignation and acceptance. This is how winter works here. It shrinks the world to manageable size, then asks you to endure it calmly. And as the fire crackles back to life, fed carefully, you settle into the long evening ahead, already aware that morning will arrive too soon and not soon enough all at once. You notice it first in your breath, not the cold itself, but the way the air inside the house feels heavier than the air outside. Warmer, yes, but thick with smoke and dampness, as if the walls themselves are breathing slowly around you. Medieval winter homes do not seal against the cold. They inhale it, exhale smoke, and live in a constant state of uneasy exchange. You stand still for a moment and let your senses adjust. The room smells of wet wool, old ash, and wood that has burned many times before. The fire crackles quietly, but it never roars. Flames are kept low, almost restrained, licking cautiously at the logs. This is not a failure of fuel alone. It is deliberate. Fire here is warmth, light, danger, and destruction all at once. The house around you is simple. Timber beams frame the space, darkened by years of smoke. In poorer homes, the walls are wattle and daub, woven branches smeared with mud and straw. In wealthier ones, stone replaces earth, but not comfort. Stone holds cold like a memory, releasing it slowly into the room long after the fire is lit. A mainstream historical fact quietly asserts itself. Chimneys were rare in early medieval England. Smoke escaped through roof vents, doors, and cracks, which means you live permanently in a low haze. Your eyes sting gently, not enough to cry, but enough to remind you that air quality is not a concept anyone worries about yet. People cough, clear their throats, and carry on. Soot settles on everything. The ceiling above you is blackened, its original color long forgotten. Winter deepens this effect, because fires burn longer, more often, and with less ventilation. You move closer to the hearth and feel the unevenness of warmth immediately. One side of your body relaxes, the other remains tense. Heat does not fill the room. It radiates outward in a limited circle, and everyone arranges themselves accordingly. Benches, stools, and work surfaces cluster near the fire like cautious animals around water. The floor beneath your feet is cold and unforgiving. Earth floors absorb moisture from boots and snowmelt, turning hard ground into a slow drain on body heat. Straw is scattered thinly, more for cleanliness than insulation. Each step presses cold back into your soles. You find yourself shifting weight constantly, not out of restlessness, but instinct. A quirky detail emerges as you watch someone adjust the fire. They place a large log at the back and smaller ones in front. Controlling burn rate with practiced precision, there is no tossing wood casually. Firewood is counted, stacked, remembered. Entire winters hinge on whether the pile outside lasts long enough. Children are taught early how to judge fuel, how to read the fire's mood. Historians still argue whether medieval houses felt warmer or colder than people expected. But expectation itself matters. You sense that no one waits for comfort here. Warmth is partial, temporary, and appreciated quietly when it arrives. Complaining wastes breath. You sit on a bench and immediately feel its chill seep through layers of clothing. Wood draws heat steadily, unbothered by your discomfort. You pull your cloak tighter and angle your body toward the fire. Knees drawn up, elbows tucked in. This posture appears everywhere. It is not taught. It spreads through observation. The house breathes with sound. Wind pushes against the walls, finding gaps to whistle through. Timber creaks softly, responding to temperature shifts. Snow or sleet taps at the roof, muted by thatch or tiles. Inside, every noise feels amplified. There is no background hum of machinery, no distant traffic. Winter silence presses close. Light flickers unpredictably. Rushlights and tallow candles provide just enough glow to function, never enough to relax fully. Shadows stretch and distort faces. Familiar people look different in this light. More severe, more tired. You realize that winter changes how people see each other, not just physically but emotionally. Expressions are harder to read. Patience wears thinner. You notice the absence of privacy. Smoke travels freely. Sound carries easily. Everyone shares the same air, the same warmth, the same discomfort. This closeness becomes both support and strain. Winter amplifies both. A small debate unfolds quietly near the hearth about whether to add another log. One voice argues, the cold is deepening. Another reminds them of how much wood remains. No one raises their voice. The fire's future is a communal decision. Winter turns resources into shared responsibility. You become aware of how moisture behaves indoors. Breath condenses faintly in the air. Damp clothing steams slightly near the fire but never fully dries. Everything smells faintly sour. Not rotten, just perpetually wet. Mold thrives unseen. Wooden beams swell and contract, opening new gaps for cold to slip through. Despite all this, the house offers protection. Outside, wind bites sharply, and darkness feels endless. Inside, even limited warmth creates a boundary between survival and exposure. This distinction matters. It shapes gratitude. People respect walls not because they are strong, but because they are enough. You glance upward again at the smoke-dark ceiling and imagine generations beneath it, breathing the same air, staring at the same beams. Winter after winter, there is continuity here, built not on comfort, but endurance. Medieval homes are not meant to defeat winter. They are meant to allow life to continue within it. As evening deepens, you sense the house settling into its night posture. Fires are adjusted downward. Movement slows. Tools are set aside. The space grows quieter. Not because people sleep yet, but because energy is being conserved. Every unnecessary motion bleeds warmth. You shift closer to the fire and feel relief spread through your fingers. Slow and cautious. Pain tingles briefly as circulation returns. You breathe shallowly to avoid coughing. This balancing act becomes familiar quickly. Too close burns. Too far freezes. Winter presses against the walls again, testing them patiently. Inside, the house responds as it always has. Flexing, leaking, holding just enough. You understand now that these homes do not protect you from winter so much as teach you how to live alongside it. And as the night stretches ahead, long and unlit, you settle into that lesson, aware that the walls around you are breathing with you, sharing the cold, the smoke, and the slow persistence of another winter night. You feel it before you see it. The subtle tension that lives around the hearth. Fire here is never just fire. It is watched, negotiated, adjusted, and sometimes argued over in low voices. As you draw closer, warmth brushes your shins, uneven and cautious, like an animal that has not yet decided whether to trust you. The flames are modest, almost shy. They cling to the wood rather than consuming it. Someone has arranged the logs carefully, spacing them so air can move just enough to keep the fire alive without letting it surge. This is not ignorance. It is restraint learned the hard way. Winter warmth is always measured against winter fear. You kneel and extend your hands, palms angled, rotating slowly. Too close, and the skin tightens painfully. Too far, and the cold immediately reclaims ground. Your fingers ache as feeling returns. A dull sting that makes you clench your jaw. No one comments. Everyone knows this sensation. It is part of the ritual of coming inside. Firewood is stacked nearby. Not generously. not sparsely, just enough to last. If treated with respect, people know exactly how much remains without counting it aloud. Memory replaces measurement. Entire households depend on this awareness. A careless evening can mean a dangerous morning. It is well understood that medieval fires were not left to burn freely. Open hearths dominated English homes for centuries. And without modern chimneys in many buildings, flame control mattered more than heat output. Too much fire meant smoke thick enough to choke, sparks lively enough to ignite roofs, and heat uneven enough to waste fuel. So the fire is kept small, obedient, almost humble. You notice how often eyes flick toward it, not constantly, but regularly, like checking on a sleeping child. Someone nudges a log inward with a stick, then pauses to observe the response. Flames adjust, settle, behave. Only then does the person sit back down. There is a quiet understanding that fire never belongs to one person. It is shared responsibility. If it goes out, everyone suffers. If it grows wild, everyone risks loss. This creates an unspoken discipline. No one feeds the fire impulsively. No one ignores it either. You smell the wood as it burns. Oak gives off a steady, grounding scent. Hazel snaps softly. Whatever is available gets used. The idea of burning wood purely for atmosphere would feel absurd here. Heat is the purpose. Light is a secondary benefit. Comfort is incidental. A lesser-known detail slips into your awareness as someone adds a piece of turf to the fire. Peat and dried sod are sometimes burned alongside wood, especially where forests are sparse or heavily managed. The smell is heavier, earthier, and the smoke thicker, but it stretches resources. Winter encourages experimentation born of necessity. The fire's light reshapes the room. Faces glow briefly, then fade into shadow as people shift. Wrinkles deepen, expressions harden, then soften. You realize that this flickering illumination makes reading emotion difficult. Misunderstandings likely multiply in winter, not just from stress, but from visibility. There is also the matter of hierarchy. The closest places to the hearth are claimed early, often by elders, children, or those whose work has left them most exposed. No one announces this rule. It emerges organically, enforced by habit and mutual recognition. Winter sharpens awareness of vulnerability. You sit slightly farther back and feel the difference immediately. Your knees warm, your shoulders remain tense. This partial relief is typical. Full warmth is rare. People learn to be grateful for gradients rather than absolutes. Disagreements about fire are subtle but frequent. Should another log be added now or later? Should embers be stirred or left undisturbed? These decisions are not trivial. They shape the entire evening. Some evenings stretch long and tolerable. Others collapse into early sleep simply because the fire cannot justify wakefulness. Accounts from later medieval records suggest that households often planned their evenings around fuel limits. Conversation, prayer, and quiet tasks filled time while the fire lasted. Once it waned, so did activity. Darkness and cold gently but firmly ended the day. You watch someone rake embers together, concentrating heat into a smaller area. This is preparation for night, not for comfort now. The goal is survival through the coldest hours, not pleasure in the present moment. That distinction governs much of winter life. There is uncertainty among historians about how often fires were allowed to burn overnight. In poorer households, embers were sometimes banked carefully, covered with ash, to preserve heat until morning. In others, the fire was allowed to die completely to reduce risk. The choice depended on construction, fuel supply, and experience. There is no single answer, only patterns shaped by fear and habit. As the fire settles into a steady rhythm, the room grows quieter, not silent, but subdued. People speak less. Movement slows. Fire invites stillness. Watching flames becomes a form of rest when options are limited. You feel drowsiness creep in, not because you are comfortable, but because the contrast between heat and cold is exhausting. The body spends energy regulating itself constantly. Sleep offers temporary relief from that effort. The fire crackles softly, releasing small bursts of sound that punctuate the quiet. Each pop draws attention, then fades. You realize that this sound anchors time in the absence of clocks. Embers collapsing mark minutes. Logs shifting mark hours. Someone nearby murmurs a short prayer. Not dramatic, just habitual. Fire and faith often share space in winter. Both promise protection without certainty. Both require care. As you pull your cloak closer and angle your body once more, you understand that fire here is not indulgence. It is negotiation. It demands attention, respect, and restraint. It gives back warmth unevenly, light unreliably, and safety conditionally. Winter presses against the walls again, patient as ever. Inside, the hearth holds its ground, small but steady, and as you settle into the long evening, you sense how much of medieval winter life revolves around this fragile center, this flickering compromise between cold and survival that shapes every night you endure. By now, the weight of your clothing feels familiar, though never comfortable. You shift your shoulders and feel damp wool drag slightly against your skin, heavy with yesterday and the day before that. Nothing you own is ever truly dry in winter. It may warm near the fire. It may steam faintly. But dryness is temporary, fleeting, and mostly imagined. You adjust the layers carefully, linen closest to the skin, then wool, then more wool. Each layer has a purpose, none of them perfect. Linen absorbs sweat and damp, but it chills quickly. Wool insulates even when wet, but it smells, scratches, and stiffens as it dries. There is no miracle fabric here. Clothing is compromise stitched together by necessity. The cold finds every weakness. It slides up sleeves when you lift your arms. It pulls around your ankles where fabric thins and gaps appear. Buttons, TS, and pins become critical. A loose fastening is not just sloppy. It is dangerous. Heat leaks constantly, and winter is always ready to claim it. People wear the same garments day after day, not out of laziness, but because changing clothes means changing into something just as cold. Washing waits for better weather. Snowmelt and icy water discourage cleanliness. The smell of bodies, smoke, and damp fabric blends into a single winter scent that everyone learns to ignore. Records from the period suggest that most medieval people owned very few sets of clothing. A working tunic, perhaps a better one for church, and layers added or removed depending on season. In winter, everything is worn at once. Fashion yields completely to function. You notice how carefully people treat their clothes. Tears are repaired immediately. Loose seams are tightened before they worsen. Fabric is valuable, not disposable. A ripped sleeve exposes skin. Exposed skin loses heat fast. Survival encourages attentiveness. A small, easily overlooked detail reveals itself as you watch someone hang a cloak near the fire. They never place it too close. Wool scorches easily. Sparks jump without warning. Burnt clothing cannot be replaced easily, and even a small hole invites cold. Drying is slow, controlled, and never complete. Shoes suffer most. Leather stiffens in cold, cracks when damp, and offers limited insulation. Straw or cloth may be stuffed inside for warmth, but this adds bulk and discomfort. Feet ache constantly, not sharply, but persistently, like a background hum you cannot turn off. There is disagreement among historians about how much medieval people felt cold compared to modern expectations. Some argue bodies adapted. Others suggest people endured far more discomfort than they admitted. Standing here, feeling the slow drain of warmth through fabric, you suspect adaptation meant tolerance, not immunity. You rub your hands together and feel friction produce brief warmth. Gloves exist, but not for everyone. Mittens are better, but rare. Fingers are often bare, red, and stiff. Dexterity fades quickly. Simple tasks take longer. Buttons resist. Knots refuse cooperation. The sensation of cold becomes layered, first sharp, then dull, then distant. You learn to recognize dangerous numbness and respond before it deepens. This awareness is taught informally. Through observation and correction, a child pulls bare hands back too late and earns a sharp word. Not cruelty, but urgency. Clothing also shapes posture. Heavy layers restrict movement. People stoop slightly, conserving warmth by curling inward. Arms stay close to the body. Gestures become smaller. Winter makes everyone more compact, physically and socially. You catch a glimpse of yourself reflected faintly in a polished metal surface. Your silhouette looks bulkier, less defined. Identity feels blurred by layers. Everyone looks similar under wool and cloaks. Rank still exists, but winter softens its edges. Cold equalizes discomfort. A curious habit becomes apparent as evening deepens. People sleep in their clothes. Not all of them, but most. Removing layers wastes heat gained throughout the day. Night clothing is simply day clothing rearranged. Cloaks double as blankets. Hoods become pillows. Belts loosen but remain on. There are mentions in later accounts of people keeping a dedicated sleeping cap or nightshirt. But these are luxuries. For most, the idea of changing into something fresh at night would feel extravagant and pointless. The goal is warmth, continuity, not cleanliness. You feel the accumulated stiffness of days spent bundled, bending, conserving. Muscles protest quietly. Joints ache more in cold. Swelling slightly. Tightening movement. Winter discomfort settles deep. Not dramatic, but relentless. Moisture remains the constant enemy. Snow melts into hems. Breath dampens scarves. Spilled water freezes clothing stiff. Drying never fully succeeds, even near the fire. Warmth evaporates surface dampness, while inner layers remain cold. You learn to accept this partial victory. There is uncertainty among scholars about how often medieval people replaced clothing entirely during winter months. Some suggest garments were worn until failure. Others believe small repairs extended life far longer than expected. What seems clear is that winter accelerated wear. Cold punished fabric as much as flesh. As you prepare for sleep, you arrange your clothing deliberately. Sleeves tucked inward, cloak wrapped tight, feet covered as best you can. You position yourself to minimize exposed skin. Every fold matters. The bench or bed beneath you is cold, unyielding. Fabric separates you from it, but only barely. You settle slowly, careful not to create drafts that invite cold air inside your layers. Stillness becomes warmth's ally. You breathe steadily, shallowly, feeling fabric rise and fall against your chest. The smell of wool and smoke is strong now, but familiar enough to fade into the background. This scent will follow you into dreams. Winter clothing does not defeat the cold. It delays it, negotiates with it, holds it at bay long enough to function. And as your body gradually relaxes into stillness, wrapped in every layer you own, you understand that survival here depends not on comfort, but on careful attention to small details repeated day after day, night after night, until spring decides to return. Sleep does not arrive cleanly. It drifts in and out, shallow and fragmented, shaped by cold more than fatigue. You lie down exactly as you are, still dressed, cloak wrapped tight, knees drawn up instinctively. The position feels protective, almost fetal, as if the body remembers something older than habit. The surface beneath you is firm. There is no mattress in the modern sense. Straw, if you are fortunate. has been gathered and refreshed recently. More often it is flattened, uneven, and faintly damp. You feel individual stalks through layers of cloth, pressing into hips and shoulders. Comfort is not the goal. Insulation is. You share the sleeping space, sometimes with family, sometimes with strangers, sometimes with both. Bodies arrange themselves like pieces of a puzzle, maximizing shared warmth. No one pretends this is ideal. It is simply efficient. Solitude costs heat, and heat is expensive. As you settle, you become acutely aware of drafts. Cold air sneaks in through gaps near the floor, along walls, beneath doors. You angle your body to block it, tucking fabric into every opening you can manage. Movement is careful. Each shift risks inviting cold back in. Breath fogs faintly in front of your face. The air feels heavier now, thick with smoke residue and human presence. You breathe shallowly, not consciously, but because deep breaths cool the lungs too quickly. The body learns this rhythm without instruction. Sleep here often comes in phases. First rest, then wakefulness, then rest again. You drift off for a while, then surface naturally, eyes opening in darkness that feels complete and close. This middle waking is quiet, not anxious, just aware. In this pause, you hear everything. The fire has settled into embers, whispering softly. Someone nearby coughs, then resettles. Wood contracts as temperature drops, making small, sharp sounds. Outside, wind scrapes along the walls, patient and persistent. Written sources from later centuries hint that this segmented sleep was common, especially in winter. People accepted it without concern. There is no pressure to force uninterrupted rest. You wake. You exist briefly, then you sleep again. You pull your cloak higher, covering mouth and nose. Fabric dampens the sting of cold air entering your lungs. The smell of wool and smoke is strongest here, close to your face. It is not pleasant, but it is reassuring. It means you are inside. A small, surprising detail surfaces as you listen to the quiet. Animals breathe nearby. Not always, but often. A dog curled near the fire. A chicken tucked into a corner. In poorer households, even larger animals might share the space. Their warmth matters. Their presence is tolerated without sentimentality. There is no darkness switch to remove all light. Embers glow faintly, just enough to outline shapes. Shadows breathe along the walls. Complete darkness is rare indoors, even when lamps are extinguished. Fire refuses to vanish entirely. You feel the cold deepen as hours pass. Night is colder than evening. The walls release stored chill steadily. Your extremities feel it first. Toes ache, then dull. Fingers stiffen. You respond by tucking them inward, closer to the body's core. This happens without thought. The body negotiates constantly. Shivering is resisted, delayed as long as possible. Shivering burns energy, and energy must be conserved. You hold still, trusting layers and proximity to do their work. Only when cold pushes too far does the body override restraint. Some people place heated stones or wrapped embers near sleeping areas, carefully monitored. Others avoid this risk entirely. Accounts differ on how common the practice was. Fire near sleep is tempting and terrifying in equal measure. You drift back into rest. Not deeply, but enough. Dreams come slowly, muted by physical awareness. Even in sleep, you feel the bench, the straw, the cold air. The body never fully disconnects. Winter sleep is alert sleep. At some point, you wake again, uncertain how long has passed. Time dissolves in darkness, without clocks, without light. The night stretches into something shapeless. You judge it by the fire's state, by your own hunger, by the ache in your joints. You listen to the breathing around you. It creates a rhythm, uneven but comforting. Each exhale confirms continued life. In winter, survival becomes audible. There is a quiet mental shift that accompanies this kind of sleep. Expectations lower. You stop demanding comfort. You stop chasing rest. You accept whatever the night offers. This acceptance is not resignation. It is adaptation. Some scholars question whether medieval people experienced sleep deprivation as we understand it. They suggest that fragmented rest, though unfamiliar now, suited the rhythms of the time. Lying here, half awake, half dreaming, you sense a different kind of rest taking place, one woven through awareness rather than absence. Cold teaches presence. Every sensation anchors you in the moment. There is no drifting far from the body, no forgetting it exists. This makes sleep lighter, but not necessarily worse. As the night reaches its coldest point, just before dawn, you feel it most sharply. The fire is nearly spent. The walls are cold to the core. Your breath feels brittle. This is the hardest hour, the one endured rather than enjoyed. You pull in tighter, curling fully now. Knees pressed to chest. Chin lowers. The body becomes small, efficient. Heat is guarded fiercely. Movement ceases almost entirely. Eventually, without announcement, the night begins to loosen. You do not know this yet, but the cold stops intensifying. It plateaus, somewhere beyond the walls. The sky prepares for light. You drift into a final stretch of sleep, deeper this time, earned through endurance. When morning comes, it will pull you back into the cycle again. But for now, wrapped in layers, sharing warmth and air and silence, you rest in the only way winter allows. Not comfortably, not completely, but sufficiently. Hunger arrives quietly at first. Then with growing insistence, you feel it before you fully wake. A hollow sensation that sharpens as the cold loosens its grip just enough for your body to notice what it lacks. Winter hunger is different from summer hunger. It is slower, more patient, but far harder to ignore once it settles in. Food in winter shrinks, not just in quantity, but in variety. You sit up and feel the familiar stiffness return, then glance toward the hearth where preparations begin without ceremony. There is no question of what will be eaten. Choice disappears long before winter reaches its deepest point. What remains is what has survived storage. Bread appears first, dense, dark, and firm, made from rye or barley rather than fine wheat. It holds together stubbornly. Resisting the knife, you tear it with your hands instead. The crust is tough, the interior dry, but it fills space in the stomach and stays there. That matters more than pleasure. You chew slowly. Everyone does. Fast eating wastes warmth through unnecessary movement. Crumbs are brushed away carefully. Nothing falls unnoticed. Winter teaches respect for small losses. Alongside the bread comes something salted. Meat, if available. Preserved long ago with heavy hands. Pork is common. Beef less so. Fish appears inland more often than you might expect. Dried or salted until its original texture is barely remembered. Freshness is a memory carried through seasoning. Surviving household accounts make it clear that winter diets leaned heavily on preserved foods. Salting, smoking, and drying kept calories available when fields lay dormant. Flavor suffered. But survival did not care about taste. You drink ale, thin and weak by modern standards, but safer than water drawn from icy sources. It warms the throat slightly, not enough to comfort, but enough to reassure. Alcohol here is not indulgence. It is nutrition, hydration, and morale combined. A pot simmers near the fire, not vigorously, just enough to keep from cooling completely. Inside, a stew stretches ingredients across time. Root vegetables dominate. Turnips, onions, leeks, Whatever was pulled from the ground before frost claimed it. Meat scraps float among them, more symbolic than filling. You watch as someone stirs slowly, deliberately. The spoon scrapes the pot's bottom, careful not to burn what little remains. Stew like this might be eaten for days, reheated repeatedly, growing thinner as it goes. Each serving tastes faintly of yesterday and the day before that. There is an odd detail you notice as bowls are passed. Portions are not equal. Children receive more broth. Adults accept less without comment. The distribution reflects need rather than fairness. Winter adjusts ethics subtly, prioritizing survival over symmetry. You sip the stew and feel warmth spread gradually through your chest. It does not last, but it arrives, and that is enough. Eating warm food changes posture. Shoulders lower slightly. Jaws unclench. Conversation becomes possible. There are murmurs about stores, how much grain remains, whether the salted meat will last until Lent. No one speaks in numbers. Estimates are vague, shaped by memory and instinct. People know when supplies feel thin without calculating precisely. Some writers from the period describe winter fasting not as spiritual discipline, but as necessity framed by faith. The church calendar aligned conveniently with scarcity, offering moral structure to enforced restraint. Whether this eased hunger or merely explained, it remains open to interpretation. You notice how quickly bowls are cleaned. Bread is used to wipe the last traces of broth. Fingers are licked without shame. Cleanliness yields to efficiency. Hunger demands thoroughness. After eating, there is no lingering satisfaction. Fullness fades quickly in cold. Calories burn faster as the body works to maintain heat. Within hours, hunger will return. Quieter, but persistent. Snacking is rare. There is no cupboard to raid casually. Meals are events, not interruptions. This gives them weight. You remember them. Anticipate them. Structure your day around them. A curious habit becomes visible as someone pockets a small piece of bread rather than finishing it. Saved for later. For night hunger. For morning. Food moves through time carefully, just like firewood. There is disagreement among modern scholars about how often medieval people experienced outright starvation during winter versus chronic undernourishment. Some evidence points to frequent shortages. Other records suggest communities adapted effectively in most years. Sitting here, with your stomach never quite satisfied, you sense that hunger existed on a spectrum, not as a single catastrophic state. Children ask fewer questions in winter. Energy conservation reaches the mind as well as the body. Adults speak calmly, reassuringly, without promising abundance. Everyone knows winter ends eventually. No one knows exactly when. As the meal concludes, bowls are stacked, pots covered, leftovers protected from rodents. Food security includes defense against small thieves. Cats are tolerated for this reason. Traps are checked. Winter makes enemies of mice. You wipe your hands on your clothing, unconcerned about stains. Wool hides marks well. Cleanliness standards bend in cold months. Water is expensive to heat. Effort is saved where it can be. The warmth from eating lingers briefly as you stand again. It gives you momentum for the next task. Whether that is work, rest, or simply enduring the hours until the next meal. Food here is fuel measured carefully against time. You realize that winter eating is not about pleasure or even satisfaction. It is about continuity. Each meal confirms that life persists another day. That confirmation matters deeply when darkness arrives early and cold never fully retreats. As you settle back near the hearth, the taste of salt and root vegetables still on your tongue, you feel hunger recede just enough to quiet. It will return, but later. For now, warmth and fullness overlap briefly, creating a fragile sense of stability. And in medieval winter, that fleeting balance is as close to comfort as you are likely to get. As darkness arrives earlier each day, you begin to notice how it reshapes people from the inside out. This is not the dramatic fear of sudden night, but a slow psychological narrowing. The world feels smaller now. Your attention pulls inward, toward voices close by, toward the fire, toward thoughts that have nowhere else to go. When the sun slips away, activity does not simply stop. It changes character. Movement becomes economical. Speech becomes quieter. Laughter, when it happens, feels more deliberate, almost precious. Winter darkness teaches restraint without ever announcing the lesson. You sit near the hearth as evening settles fully, watching shadows climb the walls. Faces appear and disappear in the low light, briefly illuminated by flame before sinking back into obscurity. Familiar people look unfamiliar in this glow. Features sharpen. Expressions seem heavier. The mind fills in gaps the eyes cannot see clearly. In towns and villages alike, nightfall alters behavior noticeably. Doors are secured earlier. Paths are avoided unless necessary. There is no wandering for its own sake. Without light, distance becomes uncertain. A short walk can turn dangerous quickly if ice or mud lies hidden. Records from medieval towns indicate that curfews were common during winter months, enforced not only by authority but by common sense. Moving after dark invited accidents, theft, or worse. Darkness itself became a form of regulation. You feel this caution settle into your own body. You move more slowly. You choose words more carefully. Even your thoughts seem to lower their volume, as if respecting the night. Conversation shifts in tone. During daylight, talk revolves around tasks and plans. At night, stories emerge, not entertainment in the modern sense, but recollection, repetition, and reflection. People recount familiar tales not because they are exciting, but because they are known. Familiarity provides comfort when visibility disappears. Someone begins telling a story you have heard before. You recognize the opening immediately, yet you listen anyway. The rhythm matters more than novelty. The voice fills space that darkness would otherwise claim. Listening becomes a way to stay warm mentally, if not physically. A small but telling detail surfaces as the story unfolds. No one interrupts. Winter teaches patience in listening. Speaking costs energy. Interrupting wastes it. Silence between words feels natural rather than awkward. You notice that humor changes too. Jokes become quieter, drier, less physical. There is less room for exaggeration when faces are half hidden and bodies are conserving heat. Wit survives. Spectacle fades. There is ongoing discussion among historians about whether medieval people feared darkness more than modern populations or simply accepted it as normal. Sitting here, you sense that fear and acceptance coexist. Darkness is familiar, but never friendly. It demands respect every evening. Superstitions surface more easily at night. Someone mentions an ill omen seen earlier in the day. Another mutters about restless spirits. These remarks are not dramatic. They are habitual, woven into conversation like weather commentary. Winter blurs boundaries between the physical and imagined, especially when light is scarce. You feel your own imagination become more active. Shadows suggest movement. Sounds feel closer. The mind fills empty space quickly when visual information thins. This is not panic. It is alertness shaped by environment. Tasks continue, but slowly. Hands work by memory rather than sight. Spinning, mending, sharpening. Movements are careful, practiced. Errors cost time and pain. Candlelight forgives nothing. You realize how much modern life relies on light to soften behavior. Here, darkness strips interactions down to essentials. Kindness becomes quieter. Irritation becomes sharper. There is less room for performance. Children grow quieter at night, not always from obedience, but from fatigue. Darkness pulls sleep forward, regardless of age. Adults speak softly, guiding rather than commanding. Winter encourages cooperation through exhaustion. A faint bell rings somewhere distant, marking evening prayers. Sound replaces sight again. You orient yourself by it instinctively. Even indoors, bells matter more in winter. They reach where eyes cannot. There are fewer disagreements at night, not because people agree more, but because conflict requires energy. Winter discourages excess emotion. Anger warms briefly, then drains heat rapidly. People learn this early. You feel drowsiness creep in sooner than expected. The mind associates darkness with rest. Even if the body is not ready, this creates a gentle tension. You resist sleep just enough to finish what needs doing, then yield without guilt. Some historians suggest that winter darkness fostered stronger communal bonds, forcing people together physically and emotionally. Others argue it intensified isolation, especially for those on the margins. Watching how people cluster near the fire, how they listen rather than speak, you sense that both are true at once. As the evening deepens, speech thins. Silence becomes companionable rather than empty. You sit, listening to the fire breathe, to wind scrape outside, to the occasional shifting of weight nearby. These sounds replace visual stimulation completely. Darkness no longer feels like absence. It feels like pressure, gentle, constant, shaping behavior without force. You adapt to it quickly, lowering expectations, narrowing focus, conserving mental energy just as carefully as physical warmth. Eventually, someone stands and signals that it is time, not with words, but with movement. Tools are set aside, lamps are adjusted lower, cloaks are pulled closer. The evening concludes not abruptly, but by consensus. As you prepare to settle down again, you understand that winter darkness is not merely something endured, it actively reshapes daily life, emotional expression, and social rhythm. It teaches people to listen more than they speak, to remember rather than invent, to rest without apology. And as the last faint light dims, leaving only embers to trace the room's outline, you feel your thoughts slow naturally, drawn inward by the same force that has guided generations through long winter nights. The dark closes gently, not as an enemy, but as a presence that demands stillness and offers, in return, a quieter kind of peace. Work never truly disappears in winter. It changes shape, retreats indoors when it can, compresses itself into shorter windows of light. But it does not release its hold on you. As morning and evening press closer together, labor fills the space between them with quiet persistence. You wake already aware of tasks waiting, not listed, not written, but felt. Winter work lives in the body as much as the mind. Fingers remember what needs mending. Eyes search instinctively for tools needing attention. Nothing announces itself loudly. Neglect shows itself later, usually when it is hardest to fix. Inside, work gathers near the fire. Spinning wheels hum softly. Wool passes through hands again and again, transformed slowly into thread. This motion warms fingers just enough to be tolerable. Rhythm replaces speed. Winter work favors repetition over urgency. You notice how tasks are chosen carefully. Anything requiring fine detail waits for the brightest part of the day. Anything relying on strength or memory can stretch into evening. Sharpening blades, repairing handles, checking bindings. These actions prepare for work not yet possible. Accounts from medieval households show that winter months were often devoted to maintenance. Tools were precious. Replacing them was difficult. Repairing them became an art. Wood was shaped slowly, deliberately, close to the hearth where fingers could still feel what they were doing. You take a tool in hand and feel its cold weight. Metal bites at skin immediately. You warm it briefly near the fire before beginning. This small ritual prevents mistakes. Cold hands slip. Slips cost blood. Blood costs heat. The sound of work fills the room. Not loud, but constant. Scraping. Tapping. the soft whir of spinning. These sounds replace outdoor noise. They create a sense of movement even as bodies stay mostly still. Children work too, in smaller ways. Sorting fibers, fetching small items, learning through observation rather than instruction. Winter education happens quietly, woven into necessity. Skills are passed on because there is time to watch now. Time stolen from fields by frost. There is a small but telling habit you notice. People pause often to warm their hands, even for a few seconds. These pauses are accepted. No one urges speed. Winter respects pacing. Pushing too hard leads to numbness, then clumsiness, then injury. Disagreements sometimes arise about what should be done first. Firewood needs splitting. Nets need mending. Grain needs checking. Decisions weigh future risk against present comfort. There is no perfect order. Choices are made based on instinct and experience. Written records suggest that winter was considered a dangerous season, not because of storms alone, but because small errors accumulated quickly. A broken tool left unrepaired, a torn garment ignored, a leak allowed to freeze and widen. Winter magnifies neglect. You feel this pressure as you work. Every action feels consequential. There is satisfaction in finishing a repair, even a small one. Completion brings relief not from pride, but from reduced risk. Outdoor work still exists, but it is chosen carefully. Animals need tending. Water must be fetched. Paths must be cleared. These tasks are done quickly, efficiently, without unnecessary exposure. You bundle up, step outside, complete the task. Return. Cold air sharpens focus. Outside, movement feels urgent. Inside, it slows again. This contrast shapes winter rhythm. Bursts of effort followed by long periods of stillness. Some historians argue that winter reduced overall productivity. Others suggest it simply shifted it. Watching how much is accomplished indoors, you suspect the latter. The work is less visible, but no less essential. You notice fatigue settle earlier in the day. Muscles tire faster in cold. The body burns energy maintaining temperature even while still. Rest is not laziness. It is maintenance. There is quiet cooperation in shared spaces. Tools are passed without comment. Someone finishes a task another started. Ownership blurs. Winter makes individual effort less important than collective survival. As daylight fades, work winds down naturally. No one forces productivity past visibility. Errors made in poor light are costly. Better to stop early than to fix mistakes tomorrow with stiff fingers. You set aside what you are doing and feel a sense of closure. Not completion of all tasks, but completion of what could be done today. Winter teaches acceptance of limits. Evening work shifts toward preparation, laying out materials for morning, checking that tools are within reach, positioning items near the fire to warm slightly overnight. These small choices ease tomorrow's start. There is also work of the mind, planning, remembering, anticipating shortages. Conversations circle around what remains undone, not as complaint, but as awareness. Winter requires mental bookkeeping. As you settle near the hearth again, hands tired but intact, you feel the quiet satisfaction of having done enough. Not everything, enough. In medieval winter, that distinction matters. The fire crackles softly. Tools rest where you left them. Tomorrow's light will be brief again. Work will return, shaped by the same constraints. And as you lean back, muscles easing slowly, you understand that winter labor is not about progress. It is about continuity, keeping life intact through repetition, repair, and restraint until warmth and daylight eventually return. Sound becomes your guide long before sight ever does. In winter, especially without steady light, your world is arranged by what you hear rather than what you see. Long before you step outside or lift your head from sleep, Bells shape the day around you. The first bell reaches you faintly, carried through cold air that seems to stretch sound farther than it should. It does not announce itself sharply. It drifts in, low and steady, settling into the space like a reminder rather than a command. You recognize it instantly. Everyone does. Church bells are not background noise. They are structure. Without clocks, without watches, and without artificial light to mark hours. Sound becomes time. Bells divide the day into moments that feel shared, even when people are scattered across fields, lanes, and houses. In winter, when visibility shrinks and routines blur, this shared timing matters more than ever. You rise when the bell suggests it is time, not because you know the hour precisely, but because you trust the rhythm. Louds, prime, terse. These names matter less than their spacing. They create a sequence that winter cannot erase. Records from medieval England show that church bells regulated not just prayer, but labour, meals, and rest. They told people when to begin, when to pause, when to gather. In winter, when daylight hours shorten unpredictably, this auditory framework stabilizes daily life. You step outside briefly and feel cold air catch in your throat. The bell rings again. Closer now. Its tone clear and resonant. Sound cuts through fog and dimness in ways sight cannot. Even if you cannot see the church tower, you can locate it instinctively, by ear. The bell also offers reassurance. Hearing it means continuity. It rang yesterday. It will ring tomorrow. Winter thrives on repetition, and bells provide it reliably. You notice how conversation pauses when bells ring, not always in reverence, but in acknowledgement. People wait, listen, then resume. The sound asserts itself gently but firmly. Inside, tasks adjust around bell times. Work pauses briefly. Hands rest. Some murmur prayers. Others simply take the moment to stretch stiff fingers. Bells carve breathing space into the day. There is an odd comfort in surrendering timekeeping to something external. You do not need to count hours. You only need to respond when sound reaches you. This frees mental energy for other concerns. Like warmth and food, you realize that bells carry authority without force. They do not chase anyone. They do not demand obedience. They simply announce presence. Ignoring them is possible, but rare. Winter encourages attention to shared signals. There is also a practical element. Bells warn of danger, fire, invasion, death. In winter, when visibility is poor and travel slow, this warning system becomes essential. Sound travels where people cannot. A lesser-known detail emerges as you listen closely. Bells sound different in cold air. Sharper, clearer. The metal contracts. The air density changes. And tones carry farther. Medieval people noticed this. Even if they did not explain it scientifically, winter bells feel louder, closer, more insistent. At night, bells matter even more. Darkness removes visual cues entirely. Bells mark evening prayers, curfews, and the approach of rest. When the final bell sounds, it feels like permission to stop. You notice how people respond to evening bells with relief rather than obligation. Work ends. Fires are adjusted. Doors are secured. The sound signals safety through withdrawal. Some historians suggest that bells reinforced social cohesion by synchronizing behavior. Others argue they reinforced control. Sitting here, listening, you sense both truths overlapping. Bells organize. Bells remind. Bells guide. You also notice who listens most closely. The elderly, the very young, those whose work keeps them indoors. Bells reach everyone equally, regardless of status. Sound does not discriminate. In winter storms, bells sometimes fall silent. Ice weighs them down. Wind distorts their reach. When this happens, unease spreads quietly. Without sound, time feels loose. People rely more heavily on instinct, which frays under prolonged cold. You imagine days when snow muffles everything, when even bells struggle to travel. Those days feel longer, heavier. Sound matters because silence can feel threatening. As evening deepens, the bell calls again. Slower now. Its rhythm stretching. You feel your body respond automatically. Shoulders relax. Movement slows. The day has reached its limit. You settle near the hearth as the final sound fades into the night air. The absence of the bell feels meaningful. It creates space for quiet. Without it, you listen more closely to smaller sounds. Fire, breath, wind. In medieval winter, sound replaces light as the organizing force of daily life. Bells hold time together when darkness tries to pull it apart. They remind you that you are part of something larger. Even when cold narrows your focus to survival, as you close your eyes and let the night claim the room again, you realize that you trust these sounds deeply. They tell you when to wake, when to work, when to rest. They carry meaning through fog, snow, and darkness. And as sleep begins to pull you under once more, the memory of the bell lingers, steady and familiar, anchoring you gently in a winter world where sound, not sight, keeps life moving forward. Cold settles into the body in ways you do not always notice at first. It does not announce itself with sharp pain or sudden collapse. Instead, it lingers, working quietly through joints, lungs, and skin, turning small weaknesses into persistent troubles. Winter illness rarely feels dramatic here. It feels ordinary, familiar, and therefore dangerous. You wake with a tightness in your chest that was not there yesterday. Breathing takes a little more effort. Each inhale carries the taste of smoke deeper into your lungs. You cough once, then again, shallow and careful, trying not to draw attention. Everyone coughs in winter. It does not always mean something is wrong, until it does. The air inside the house is warm enough to function, but never clean. Smoke hangs low, trapped beneath the roof, especially on still days when there is little wind to pull it out. Your eyes sting faintly. Your throat feels dry. These sensations are constant companions. So constant they fade into the background unless they worsen. Surviving medical writings from medieval England describe winter coughs, chest tightness, and lingering fevers as expected seasonal afflictions. Physicians blamed cold humours, damp air, and imbalance within the body. Whatever the explanation, the outcome was the same. Winter made people sick more often and kept them sick longer. You notice how people respond to illness. There is concern, but not alarm. A cough is watched, not rushed. Someone offers a warm drink, perhaps infused with herbs gathered months ago and dried carefully. Honey, if available, is prized. It soothes the throat and lifts spirits. A less obvious detail reveals itself in how people position the sick. They are moved closer to the fire, but not too close. Warmth helps. Smoke hurts. This balance is delicate. Someone adjusts the seating quietly, making space without comment. Care here is practical rather than emotional. Fever behaves strangely in winter. It chills as much as it heats. You feel cold even when your skin burns. Blankets are added, then removed. The body struggles to regulate itself in an environment already hostile to balance. You become aware of how dampness worsens everything. Wet clothing chills the body relentlessly. Cold floors draw heat downward. Breath condenses on walls and beams, leaving moisture behind. Mold grows invisibly, aggravating lungs further. Winter houses are never fully dry. Some medieval healers recommended opening doors or windows briefly to clear smoke. Even in cold weather, others warned against letting cold air touch the sick. the advice conflicted, leaving households to rely on experience rather than theory. What worked one winter might fail the next. You observe how illness changes routine. Work slows. But it does not stop entirely. People do what they can. When they can. Rest exists, but not as a dedicated practice. Survival requires balance. Too much rest wastes time. Too little worsens sickness. Children fall ill more easily. Their smaller bodies lose heat faster. When they cough, adults listen closely. Childhood illness in winter carries extra weight. There is no easy treatment. Care becomes vigilance. You notice how sleep changes when illness creeps in. Breathing becomes louder, uneven. Sleep grows lighter. Dreams fragment. Night feels longer when each breath requires effort. There is uncertainty among modern scholars about how medieval people understood contagion. Some evidence suggests they noticed patterns of sickness spreading. Other sources emphasize environmental causes. Watching how people space themselves subtly around someone coughing, you suspect observation filled gaps where theory failed. Food becomes medicine by necessity. Warm broth, soft bread, nothing heavy. Appetite fades, but nourishment remains essential. Eating becomes an act of discipline rather than pleasure. You feel the cold press harder when energy dips. Illness makes warmth harder to maintain. The body spends fuel fighting internally, leaving less for temperature. Shivering comes more easily. Exhaustion follows. The fire becomes both comfort and threat again. Warmth helps joints loosen. Smoke irritates lungs further. Someone adjusts the fire lower, reducing smoke at the cost of heat. This compromise repeats itself endlessly. You sense how winter illness reshapes social space. The sick are neither isolated nor surrounded excessively. Care is steady, restrained. Emotional outbursts waste energy. Calm conserves it. At night, fear creeps closer. Illness feels heavier after dark. Breathing sounds louder. Coughs echo. Without light, imagination fills in possibilities. You listen to each breath, measuring its rhythm unconsciously. Written accounts from monasteries and towns note higher mortality in winter months, especially among the elderly. Cold weakens resistance. Respiratory illness thrives. This knowledge lingers quietly, shaping caution without panic. You notice older people move less in winter, conserving energy deliberately. They sit closer to warmth, speak less, listen more. Experience teaches them restraint. As the night deepens, you wrap your cloak tighter, feeling your own chest again. The tightness has eased slightly. Warmth and rest help. Not every illness becomes serious. Many pass quietly, leaving only fatigue behind. Still, winter reminds you how thin the line is. Health feels provisional, maintained through constant adjustment. A draft here, damp boots there, and balance tips. You drift into sleep carefully, propped slightly to ease breathing. The fire murmurs softly. Someone nearby shifts to keep watch. Not officially, but instinctively, winter illness encourages quiet guardianship. Morning will bring reassessment, better or worse, stronger or weaker. Decisions will follow accordingly. Winter forces evaluation daily. As you rest, you understand that sickness here is not an interruption of life. It is woven into it, especially in winter. The cold, the smoke, the damp, and the darkness conspire gently, persistently. Survival depends not on avoiding illness entirely, but on managing it calmly, attentively, and without illusion. And as your breathing steadies and sleep finally deepens, you accept this fragility as part of the season itself. Another challenge to be endured patiently until light and warmth eventually return. You hear them before you fully notice them. A soft shuffle, a low snort, the muted scrape of hooves against packed earth just beyond the threshold of the room. Animals are closer now, closer than comfort might allow in another season. In winter, boundaries soften. You shift slightly and catch the smell immediately. Warm, sour, unmistakably alive. Livestock do not disappear when the cold arrives. They become part of the shelter, part of the shared effort to keep warmth from leaking away into the dark. In poorer households especially, animals move indoors during the worst months. Not all of them, not always, but enough to matter. A cow might be housed in an attached byre. Sheep may be brought into a lower level or partitioned space. Chickens roost wherever drafts are weakest. Their bodies generate heat steadily, without complaint. This arrangement is not sentimental. It is practical. Animals are valuable assets. Winter kills them easily if left exposed. Bringing them closer protects investment and increases the total warmth available to humans. The smell and noise are accepted costs. You notice how the room feels different with animals present. Warmer, slightly more humid. Breath hangs longer in the air. Condensation gathers on beams and walls. Moisture becomes a problem, but cold would be worse. Written descriptions from medieval farms suggest that human and animal spaces often overlapped in winter, separated by low walls or simple partitions. Clean separation was rare. Survival mattered more than hygiene. You listen to the slow breathing of a cow nearby. It is steady, rhythmic, grounding. Large animals radiate heat quietly. People learn to position themselves near shared walls, drawing benefit without intrusion. This proximity creates an unspoken awareness of each other's presence. Animals also bring sound. Shifting weight, occasional stamping, soft vocalizations in the night. These noises become part of the winter soundscape, replacing wind when storms die down. Silence feels different when animals are near. Less empty, less threatening. There is a small but revealing habit you notice. People check on animals frequently at night, not hovering, just glancing, listening. Livestock illness in winter can spread quickly. A sick animal means loss of food, labor, and warmth all at once. Feeding becomes more careful too. Stored fodder is rationed just like human food. Hay is measured. Grain is guarded. Animals that eat too much now leave nothing for later. Balance extends across species. You feel a slight warmth through the wall at your back. On the other side, an animal shifts. The heat transfer is subtle but real. In winter, even small gains matter. There is debate among historians about how common indoor animal housing truly was across medieval England. Evidence varies by region and wealth. Some areas favoured separate structures. Others blurred lines more freely. What seems clear is that winter encouraged closeness wherever it was possible. Animals also change sleep. Their movement wakes you briefly, then reassures you. A startled animal might signal danger. A calm one suggests safety. People learn to read these cues instinctively. Smell is constant. Manure, hay, animal breath. It blends with smoke and damp fabric into a complex winter scent. You stop noticing it consciously after a while. The nose adapts faster than the mind. There is also the matter of parasites. Fleas, lice, and other pests thrive in shared warmth. Winter does not eliminate them. It concentrates them. People scratch absently, accustomed to irritation. Cleanliness standards adjust downward, not from ignorance, but from fatigue. Despite these drawbacks, animals offer psychological comfort too. Their presence reminds you that life continues beyond human concerns. They eat, sleep, breathe steadily. This rhythm steadies the household. You watch someone stroke a dog absently near the fire. Not affection exactly, but acknowledgement. Dogs serve practical roles: guarding stores, alerting to intruders, controlling vermin. In winter, their warmth is an added benefit. Chickens cluck softly as they settle. Their eggs, when available, are prized. Winter egg production drops sharply. Everyone matters. People track this without charts, just memory and habit. You consider how winter reshapes relationships between humans and animals. Utility dominates, but care remains. Neglecting animals risks future survival. Kindness aligns with self-interest. Night deepens and the animals quiet. Their breathing blends with human breathing, creating a layered rhythm. This shared soundscape feels ancient, older than walls, older than villages. There are moments of irritation. An animal shifts too loudly. A smell intensifies unexpectedly. Someone mutters softly. But winter reduces tolerance for disruption from outside, not inside. Shared discomfort fosters patience. You drift into sleep again, warmed slightly by the presence around you. Not comfortable, but buffered. The cold still exists. It presses at the edges, but inside, life clusters tightly, refusing to disperse. Morning will bring feeding, cleaning, checking. Animals require attention regardless of weather. This responsibility structures the day early, pulling people from sleep before light arrives. As you rest, you realize that winter survival here is collective in a literal sense. Heat, breath, food, space are shared across species. Boundaries that feel essential in warmer months dissolve under pressure. And as the night holds steady, animals and humans alike conserving energy. You sense how medieval winter living blurs distinctions modern life insists upon. Shelter becomes a living organism, breathing together, enduring together, waiting patiently for the slow return of warmth and light. Stepping outside in winter is never casual. You pause at the threshold first, listening, feeling the air press against the door, weighing the decision. Travel now is not about distance alone. It is about risk, timing, and judgment. Every journey, no matter how short, carries consequences that linger long after you return. You wrap your cloak tighter and step into the cold. The ground beneath your feet is unpredictable. What looks firm may collapse into mud. What looks wet may be frozen hard enough to twist an ankle. Paths change daily as temperatures rise and fall. Familiar routes lose their reliability. Winter roads in medieval England are rarely roads in the modern sense. They are rutted tracks, beaten down by hooves and carts, softened by rain, hardened by frost. Maintenance exists, but irregularly. Local communities clear what they must. When they can, snow is trampled rather than removed. Ice is endured rather than fixed. You move carefully, shortening your stride. Balance matters more than speed. A fall in winter is not just painful, it can be catastrophic. Wet clothes draw heat from the body relentlessly. Getting up quickly becomes a skill worth learning. Distance feels longer in cold. Muscles tighten. Breath burns. You conserve energy instinctively, stopping briefly to adjust layers or catch your breath. No one mocks this. Winter humbles everyone equally. Written accounts from medieval travelers emphasize caution during winter months. Journeys were delayed or abandoned altogether when conditions worsened. Travel without necessity was rare. The idea of moving for leisure would feel strange, even irresponsible. You notice how sound behaves outdoors. Snow muffles footsteps. Wind carries voices unpredictably. Without clear visual landmarks, orientation relies on memory and instinct. You track your position by hedges, trees, and the slope of land rather than signs. Villages feel farther apart now. Fields lie empty. Fences blur into the landscape. The world appears stripped down, reduced to essentials. This makes getting lost easier than expected. Even those who know the land well can misjudge distance in poor light. There is a small detail that catches your attention as you walk. People carry sticks, not just for balance, but for probing ground ahead. Ice hides beneath thin layers of snow. Water pools beneath frozen surfaces. A careful tap can prevent disaster. Animals struggle too. Horses move slowly, their breath steaming. Hooves slip. Loads are lighter. Cart travel becomes hazardous. When wagons tip, goods scatter into mud and snow, often unrecoverable. Some historians note that winter isolation shaped local economies deeply. Communities relied heavily on stored goods and local networks. Trade continued, but cautiously. Markets shrank. Prices rose. Risk increased. You feel this isolation physically as you walk. The distance between dwellings seems greater. Silence dominates. Even birds are quieter. Winter removes background noise, leaving only what matters. When you reach your destination, relief arrives quickly. Shelter, even temporary, means safety. You stamp your feet, knock snow from hems, and step inside. Warmth feels sharper after exposure. Smells intensify. Sounds return. Travel also shapes social interaction. Visits are shorter. Conversations focus on purpose rather than pleasantries. Lingering wastes heat and light. Winter teaches efficiency in human contact. You notice how messages travel now. News spreads slower. Roads delay information as much as people. Rumors persist longer. Certainty fades. This makes winter a season of speculation as much as survival. At night, travel becomes unthinkable. Darkness and cold combine to make movement reckless. Stories circulate about those who ignored this wisdom. Lost travelers. Frozen bodies found near familiar paths. These stories are told quietly, not to frighten, but to remind. There is disagreement among scholars about how often winter travel disasters occurred versus how often they were remembered. Catastrophe leaves stronger traces in memory than routine success. Still, caution dominates behavior. You return home before light fades, satisfied with having accomplished what was necessary. The door closes behind you, shutting out wind and uncertainty. Inside feels smaller, but safer. Winter travel narrows the world physically and mentally. You plan carefully. You avoid excess. You value proximity. The idea of wandering fades. Place becomes anchor. As you settle back near the hearth, boots drying slowly, you reflect on how movement itself changes meaning in winter. It becomes deliberate, purposeful, restrained. Each journey completed feels like a small victory. Tomorrow, you may need to travel again, or you may wait, watching the sky, listening to wind, deciding whether the risk is worth it. Winter grants no guarantees, only choices weighted by consequence. And as the night deepens and the fire steadies, you are grateful for stillness, for walls, for warmth held imperfectly but persistently. In medieval winter, staying put is often the wisest journey of all. Markets do not disappear in winter. They thin, contract, and change character. But they remain, stubborn and necessary. You feel this shift as soon as you approach the market space. The crowd is smaller, the noise softer, movement slower, more deliberate. Stalls stand farther apart now, not by design, but by absence. Some traders simply do not come in winter. Travel is risky. Goods are scarce. Profit margins narrow. Those who remain do so out of necessity rather than optimism. You pull your cloak tighter as you move between stalls. Breath clouds the air. Voices carry differently here, sharper in the cold. Transactions feel quieter, almost solemn. Winter does not encourage haggling. Everyone understands limits. Grain dominates the market. Sacks are smaller than they were months ago. Prices have crept upward gradually. Without announcement, no one pretends this is temporary. Winter pricing reflects stored reality, not hopeful future harvests. Records from medieval towns indicate that winter markets were heavily regulated. Officials monitored weights and measures closely. Cheating in winter carried heavier moral weight. Scarcity sharpened scrutiny. You notice how people inspect goods carefully. Bread is weighed in the hand. Meat is examined for signs of spoilage. Fish is sniffed cautiously. Winter makes mistakes costly. A bad purchase cannot be replaced easily. A less obvious detail emerges as you watch exchanges unfold. Payment often includes credit, not formal contracts, but remembered obligations. Names are noted mentally. Trust extends cautiously. Winter binds communities through shared risk. You hear murmurs about shortages elsewhere. A village to the north ran low on grain. A trader failed to arrive. News spreads unevenly, mixing fact and speculation. Markets become information hubs as much as economic ones. You sense tension beneath the surface. Not panic, but awareness. Everyone calculates how long supplies must last. Each purchase subtracts from the future. Spending feels heavier. There is also generosity. A vendor adds an extra scoop quietly. A neighbor pays slightly less than expected. These gestures are small, discreet, and meaningful. Winter generosity avoids spectacle. Historians differ on how often medieval winters produced famine versus prolonged strain. Evidence suggests that outright famine was episodic, but hunger was constant. Standing here, you feel the latter more strongly. No one starves today, but no one feels secure either. The market smells different in winter. Less fresh produce, more dried goods. Salt dominates. Smoke clings to everything. The air carries hints of rot beneath preservation. You notice fewer children running freely. They stay close to adults, conserving energy. Play yields to observation. Winter markets are places to learn quietly. As daylight fades, the market winds down quickly. Stalls close early. Goods are covered. Unsold items are packed away carefully. Darkness approaches fast, and no one wants to linger. You make your purchases deliberately. Bread, a small amount of dried fish, perhaps a bit of fat if available. Each item is chosen with thought toward days ahead, not just tonight. Returning home, you feel the weight of supplies against your side. Not heavy, but significant. Each item represents effort. Storage, planning. Winter turns food into responsibility. Inside, goods are stored immediately. Rodents are enemies now. Containers are sealed. Hanging hooks are checked. Security matters as much as acquisition. The market experience lingers with you. It reinforces awareness of limits without crushing morale. Winter markets teach realism. Hope exists, but it is practical, measured. As you settle near the hearth again, you think about how trade persists even under strain. Exchange continues because it must. Community survives through shared scarcity as much as shared abundance. The fire flickers. Purchased food waits its turn. Tomorrow, the market will look much the same. Smaller, quieter, necessary. In medieval winter, markets do not promise prosperity. They promise continuity. Enough to endure. Enough to carry on. And as night closes in once more, that promise feels sufficient. As evening deepens and work falls away, something else takes its place. Not entertainment, in the modern sense. Not distraction, but story. You feel the shift as people settle closer together. Bodies angled inward. Attention turning from hands to voices. Winter leaves room for this. Long nights demand something to fill them. Someone clears their throat softly and begins. There is no announcement. No request for silence. The voice simply starts, and others follow it naturally. Stories here are rarely new. They do not need to be. Familiar tales carry weight because they have been tested, repeated through many winters, shaped by countless evenings like this one. You recognize parts of the story almost immediately. The rhythm, the pauses, the expected turn. Knowing what comes next does not reduce its power. It increases it. Anticipation becomes comfort. The mind relaxes when it does not need to guess. Firelight dances across faces as the story unfolds. Expressions change subtly. A remembered moment draws a faint smile. A warning tale tightens shoulders slightly. These reactions are shared quietly, without exaggeration. Winter discourages theatrical response. Stories serve many purposes at once. They pass time. They reinforce values. They warn without scolding. They preserve memory when written records are rare. In winter, when movement slows and thought turns inward, storytelling becomes essential. You notice how children listen. They sit still longer than they did during daylight. Darkness sharpens attention. Without visual distractions, words carry more weight. Lessons slide into place without resistance. A detail catches your attention as a story about the past is told. Names change depending on who tells it. Locations shift slightly. The core remains. Truth here is flexible, shaped by relevance rather than precision. Accuracy matters less than usefulness. Some stories recall harsh winters long ago. Crops lost. Animals frozen. People tested. These tales are not told to frighten, but to contextualize the present. Compared to those winters, this one feels survivable. Perspective becomes a tool for endurance. There is also humor, though it is understated. Small ironies, gentle teasing. Laughter surfaces briefly, then fades. Too much laughter draws breath, wastes heat. Winter humor conserves energy. You sense that storytelling changes the pace of time. Minutes stretch pleasantly. The fire burns lower without notice. Outside, wind presses against walls. But inside, attention is elsewhere. Scholars examining medieval oral culture note how storytelling compensated for limited literacy. Knowledge traveled by voice. Memory replaced paper. Winter evenings offered uninterrupted hours for this exchange. Listening became education. You find yourself relaxing into the cadence of speech. The voice rises slightly, then falls. Pauses appear at natural points, giving space to absorb meaning. Silence between phrases feels intentional, not awkward. Stories also reinforce community boundaries. Local legends matter more than distant tales. Familiar landmarks anchor imagination. Knowing the land means knowing its stories. A quieter moment follows one tale, as another begins. This one carries a moral lesson, a warning against greed, a reminder of generosity rewarded. The lesson is not spelled out. It is implied, left for listeners to absorb. You notice how elders speak differently when telling stories. Slower, more deliberate. Their words carry authority not because of volume, but because of experience. Winter grants them an attentive audience. There is debate among historians about how much of medieval belief was shaped by such stories versus formal teaching. Sitting here, you sense that repetition shapes conviction deeply. Hearing something many times in the dark gives it roots. As the night deepens, stories shorten, attention softens, voice is lower, the body prepares for rest. No one pushes for excitement. Winter does not reward stimulation. It rewards calm. Eventually, storytelling fades naturally. No clear ending. Someone finishes a sentence and does not continue. Silence follows. Accepted without comment. The fire murmurs softly. Filling the space, words vacate. You feel a sense of closeness that did not exist earlier. Stories draw people together quietly, aligning thought and mood. Shared narrative becomes shared endurance. As you shift to prepare for sleep, the last story lingers in your mind. Its images replace the day's worries. Cold and hunger feel slightly more distant, buffered by memory. In medieval winter, stories are not luxury. They are insulation for the mind. They slow thought, steady emotion, and make long nights bearable. And as you settle back into stillness, wrapped in layers and shared silence, you understand why people have always told stories when light runs out. As the nights stretch longer, thought has more room to wander. You feel this shift quietly, not as fear, exactly, but as heightened awareness. In winter darkness, imagination does not need encouragement. It fills space naturally, especially when light thins and silence deepens. You notice how conversations change after stories fade. Voices lower further. Topics drift toward signs. Omens. Things half remembered. Someone mentions a strange sound heard earlier near the edge of the fields. Another recalls a winter long ago when misfortune followed unusual weather. No one laughs these comments away. They are absorbed thoughtfully. Superstition does not announce itself here as belief versus disbelief. It exists as caution layered onto experience. When winter brings unpredictability, people seek patterns. They read the world closely. Even when evidence is thin, you become aware of small rituals that surface more often now. A piece of iron placed near the door, a prayer murmured before sleep, ashes arranged carefully around the hearth. These actions are not dramatic. They are habitual, comforting, performed without explanation. Written sources from medieval England suggest that protective charms and spoken blessings were common in winter months. Cold, illness, and scarcity encouraged spiritual vigilance. Whether these practices worked mattered less than the sense of control they offered. You feel the pull of this mindset yourself. Darkness makes sounds ambiguous. A creak in the wall could be wind, or something else. The mind fills gaps when vision fails. You listen more closely than you would during daylight. Animals react to this too. A sudden movement from the byre draws attention. A dog lifts its head, ears alert. This reaction ripples through the room. Everyone pauses briefly, then relaxes when nothing follows. Vigilance ebbs and flows. You notice how winter strengthens belief in boundaries. Thresholds matter. Doorways, hearths, corners where light struggles to reach. These spaces attract meaning. People avoid leaving doors open longer than necessary. They do not step outside at night without reason. Some practices feel contradictory. Faith and folklore mingle freely. A prayer to God followed by a folk charm without conflict. Medieval belief systems accommodate layers rather than demanding consistency. There is uncertainty among scholars about how deeply people believed in supernatural explanations versus using them as symbolic language. Sitting here, you sense belief as fluid. Fear, habit, tradition, and faith intertwine without needing separation. You feel time slow further as night deepens. Thoughts turn inward. Worries surface more easily. Winter encourages reflection, sometimes too much of it. Superstition offers a way to externalize anxiety, to give it shape and ritual. You hear someone caution against certain actions tomorrow. Avoid a particular path. Delay a task. The reasoning is vague, but the advice is heeded. In winter, erring on the side of caution feels wise regardless of cause. You notice how children absorb these cues. They listen carefully, eyes wide but not frightened. Superstition becomes part of learning the world, not as terror, but as awareness of unseen forces. Firelight flickers unevenly, casting shapes that suggest movement where none exists. You blink, and the shapes dissolve. This visual uncertainty reinforces caution. Winter light is unreliable. A memory surfaces of earlier mention of odd practices. Ash patterns, iron charms, repeated prayers. You realize these are not isolated. They form a web of behavior designed to create order where nature offers none. Some historians argue that winter intensified religious observance. Others suggest it revived older folk practices suppressed during more active seasons. Watching how seamlessly these coexist, you suspect winter simply made room for both. As the hour grows late, superstition softens into routine. Rituals are completed, doors checked, fires banked. These actions reassure. They signal readiness for night. You prepare for sleep with care. Positioning matters. Facing the fire, keeping feet covered. Some people prefer certain sleeping arrangements in winter, believing they influence luck or health. These preferences are respected quietly. The mind resists sleep briefly, alert to every sound. Then, gradually, vigilance gives way to exhaustion. Superstition fades into background hum, like the wind outside. As you drift toward rest, you understand that winter belief is not about fear of the unknown. It is about negotiating uncertainty with limited tools. Stories, rituals, and symbols provide structure when control feels distant. In the long medieval winter, superstition becomes a companion rather than a threat. It walks alongside daily life, offering explanation where none is clear, comfort where none is guaranteed. And as your breathing steadies and sleep returns once more, you let these thoughts settle gently, knowing that daylight will shrink the unknown again, if only for a few hours. For now, winter night holds you in its quiet uncertainty, softened by shared belief and routine, until morning finds its way back. Winter changes how rules feel, not the rules themselves, but their weight. In warmer months, law exists alongside movement, noise, and distraction. In winter, it stands out sharply against stillness. You sense this as soon as you step outside after nightfall. The quiet is heavier, and with it comes awareness of boundaries. Order in medieval England relies less on constant enforcement and more on shared understanding. Winter reinforces this. Darkness limits opportunity. Cold discourages excess. The environment itself becomes a kind of guard. You notice that people move with purpose, not just because travel is difficult, but because wandering draws attention. A figure moving at night becomes visible through sound, breath, and silhouette. Snow crunches. Frost snaps underfoot. Even without light, presence announces itself. Town watches take winter seriously. Fewer people are willing to serve in harsh weather, but vigilance increases. A watchman stamping his feet against the cold listens carefully, relying on sound more than sight. His lantern offers limited light, but its glow carries authority. Curfews matter more now. Bells mark when doors should close. Those still outside hurry home, not wanting to explain themselves. Winter does not forgive delay easily. You sense that enforcement feels closer in winter, even when fewer officials are present. Community scrutiny sharpens. Neighbors notice who comes and goes. Familiar patterns stand out against reduced activity. Deviations invite questions. Written town records show that many offences declined during winter simply because opportunity shrank. Theft, brawling, and disorder were harder to sustain when cold punished exposure. Yet desperation sometimes pushed others to risk it anyway. You feel the tension underlying this balance. Scarcity presses people toward rule-breaking, even as winter makes it harder. A stolen loaf carries greater moral weight now. Hunger complicates judgment. Punishment feels different in winter too. Imprisonment in cold stone cells is harsher. Stocks and public penalties become more severe when exposure threatens health. Authorities sometimes delay punishment until weather improves, though not always. There are disagreements among scholars about whether winter justice was more lenient or more cruel. Evidence points both ways. Some communities exercised restraint, recognizing hardship. Others enforced rules strictly to prevent disorder from spreading. You notice how disputes are handled more quietly. Arguments that might erupt in summer are postponed or softened. Cold drains the energy required for confrontation. Winter favors mediation over escalation. Inside the household, order tightens as well. Shared spaces demand cooperation. Minor conflicts are smoothed over quickly. No one benefits from prolonged tension when warmth and resources are shared. Children receive sharper correction in winter, not out of impatience, but caution. A reckless action can lead to injury or exposure. Discipline becomes preventative rather than punitive. You observe how alcohol use shifts. Ale remains common, but excess is discouraged. Drunkenness in winter invites danger. Falling asleep outdoors, stumbling into icy water, or provoking conflict can turn fatal. Church influence on law feels stronger now. Sermons emphasize order, patience, and restraint. Winter aligns moral messaging with practical survival. Obedience becomes framed as wisdom. There is also the role of shame. Community memory is long in winter. With fewer events to distract, reputations linger. A misdeed is remembered longer when days are quiet. You hear stories of those who broke rules and suffered for it. These tales circulate not as entertainment, but warning. Consequence feels closer in winter, more immediate. Traveling judges and officials move less frequently. This gives local authorities greater discretion. Village leaders resolve matters internally whenever possible. Winter encourages self-regulation. You feel the comfort of predictability. Knowing what is expected reduces risk. Order provides warmth of a different kind. Psychological stability in uncertain months. As night deepens, you see fewer lights. Doors are barred, windows shuttered. The world closes in on itself deliberately. Law in winter is as much about withdrawal as enforcement. You return indoors, grateful for the boundary between inside and out. Rules follow you there too, shaping how resources are shared, how silence is kept, how sleep is protected. In medieval winter, law and order do not dominate through force alone. They work alongside cold and darkness, reinforced by environment and necessity. Survival depends on cooperation as much as compliance. As you settle near the hearth, you feel this structure holding quietly around you. Not oppressive, not absent, simply present, like the cold itself. Winter teaches that order is not just imposed, it is lived, day after shortened day, until light and movement return. Relief has a sound in winter. It is not loud or celebratory. It arrives as quiet chanting, the shuffle of robes, the soft echo of footsteps on stone. You feel it as you approach the monastery, even before you understand why. The building rises from the cold landscape with a calm that feels deliberate, almost patient. Stone walls hold the chill fiercely, yet there is a sense of order here that changes how the cold is experienced. The monastery does not promise comfort. It offers predictability. In winter, that distinction matters deeply. You step inside and notice the air immediately, cooler than a hearth room, but steadier. Less smoke, more still. Stone absorbs sound, softening voices and movements. The quiet feels intentional, cultivated. Monasteries follow rhythms that winter cannot fully disrupt. Bells ring on schedule. Prayers occur regardless of weather. Meals arrive at expected times, even if they are simple. This regularity offers refuge not from cold, but from uncertainty. Historical records describe monasteries as places of winter stability. Their stores were managed carefully. Grain, ale, and preserved foods were rationed according to rules refined over generations. Scarcity was anticipated rather than feared. You notice how the monks move. Slowly, deliberately. Each step seems considered. Winter encourages this pace. There is no rushing here. No unnecessary movement. Energy is conserved through habit. Warmth inside the monastery is uneven. Much like elsewhere, fires burn in specific spaces, often limited to communal rooms. Cells remain cold. Monks sleep clothed, wrapped in blankets, much like everyone else. Devotion does not eliminate discomfort. What changes is how discomfort is framed. Cold becomes a shared condition rather than an individual burden. Silence allows the mind to settle rather than fight sensation. You hear murmured prayers echo softly along corridors. The sound is steady, soothing. Words repeat, creating a rhythm that competes gently with the cold for attention. Focus shifts inward. A detail stands out as you observe winter life here. Monasteries often welcomed travelers during harsh weather, offering shelter without expectation of payment. This hospitality was not endless, but it was real. Winter blurred boundaries between religious community and wider society. There is debate among historians about how widespread such hospitality truly was. Some monasteries were generous, others were cautious. What seems clear is that monasteries represented points of refuge in a harsh seasonal landscape. You notice how illness is treated here. The infirmary is spare but purposeful. Herbs are stored carefully. Warmth is prioritized where possible. Care is systematic rather than improvised. Winter labor continues inside the monastery too. Manuscripts are copied slowly. Hands stiff but persistent. Candles are rationed carefully. Light is precious, reserved for tasks deemed worthy. You feel the difference between monastery quiet and household quiet. Here, silence feels intentional rather than imposed. It offers space to think without spiraling. Meals are taken communally, in silence or near silence. Food is plain. Portions are modest. Yet there is reassurance in consistency. You know when the next meal will come. That knowledge alone eases hunger. You sit on a bench and feel the cold stone beneath you. It does not invite relaxation. Instead, it encourages alertness. Monastic winter life does not seek comfort. It seeks steadiness. Some scholars suggest that monasteries functioned as psychological anchors during winter, modeling endurance through routine. Watching how the monks accept cold without complaint, you sense how this example might spread outward into surrounding communities. As evening approaches, prayers deepen, candles flicker against stone walls, shadows remain close, never fully banished. Winter darkness is acknowledged rather than resisted. You feel your breathing slow. The mind follows structure willingly when offered. Cold fades slightly into background sensation. When night arrives, the monastery settles quickly. Movement ceases. Silence thickens. The building seems to hold itself still. You lie down, clothed and covered, listening to the faint sounds of the place. A cough, a shifting blanket, the distant bell marking night hours. These sounds feel reassuring. Winter inside a monastery does not feel easy. It feels manageable. The cold remains, but it is contained within a framework of meaning. As sleep approaches, you understand why monasteries mattered so deeply during medieval winters. They did not eliminate hardship. They organized it. They turned endurance into practice, repetition, and calm acceptance. And as your eyes close, wrapped in borrowed warmth and steady rhythm, you let that calm carry you into rest, trusting that the bell will sound again, marking another small victory over the long winter night. Cold reveals inequality quickly. It does not need time to build arguments or present evidence. It simply settles in, and the differences become visible. You notice it in how people stand, how they move, how long they linger near warmth before stepping away. Those with fewer resources feel winter sooner. Their clothing is thinner, their fuel piles smaller, their margins narrower. A cold night that feels uncomfortable for one household feels dangerous for another. This difference is not announced. It is observed. You see it in posture. People with adequate layers move with a little more ease. Those without hunch inward, conserving heat constantly. Their hands are redder, their faces tighter. Winter draws lines through the community that summer softens. Housing matters deeply now. A solid roof, thick walls, fewer drafts. These things decide how much energy the body must spend simply to remain alive. Poorer homes leak cold relentlessly. Fires struggle to compensate. Night stretches longer there. Historical records from medieval England suggest that winter mortality rose sharply among the poor. Cold, weakened bodies, already stressed by limited diet and hard labor. Illness lingered. Recovery slowed. Winter punished those with the least reserve. You notice how the poor cluster near communal warmth whenever possible. Churches, workshops, market halls during open hours. These spaces offer temporary relief. No one says this is why they are there. Everyone understands. Food scarcity hits unevenly as well. Wealthier households planned storage carefully. Poorer ones relied more heavily on daily labor and local charity. When work slowed, hunger followed quickly. You see quiet exchanges that confirm this. A loaf passed discreetly. A bowl filled a little more generously than expected. Charity in winter avoids attention. Pride remains strong even when need grows. There are institutional responses too. Almsgiving increases during winter months. Churches distribute food. Guilds support members. These systems do not eliminate suffering, but they reduce its sharpest edges. Scholars continue to debate how effective medieval charity truly was. Some argue it was insufficient and uneven. Others point to records showing organized relief prevented widespread collapse in many years. Standing here, you sense both truths at once. You notice that children bear winter hardship visibly. Thin limbs, quiet behavior. Adults shield them where possible, sacrificing comfort silently. Childhood hunger in winter leaves lasting marks. Elders face similar vulnerability. Cold settles into joints that no longer recover easily. Movement slows further. Energy wanes. Families adjust roles to protect them when possible. Winter also reshapes social expectations. Asking for help becomes more acceptable. Offering it becomes more expected. Pride bends under pressure, though it rarely breaks completely. You hear fewer celebrations now. Weddings are postponed. Festivals subdued. Winter does not encourage extravagance. Survival takes precedence. There is tension beneath this restraint. Resentment sometimes surfaces. Why does one household have more wood? Why does another eat better? These thoughts appear quietly, then fade. Winter discourages open conflict, but inequality remains felt. Punishment for theft becomes complicated. A stolen loaf carries different weight in winter. Communities struggle to balance justice and mercy. Decisions vary by place and circumstance. You sense how winter teaches empathy through shared discomfort. Even those with resources feel the cold. This shared experience narrows social distance slightly, though it never erases it. As evening falls, the poor retreat earlier. Fires burn lower. Sleep comes sooner, driven by cold rather than rest. Wealth offers longer evenings, more light, more choice. You return indoors and feel gratitude for warmth that others lack. This awareness sits quietly, not as guilt, but as recognition. Winter sharpens perspective. In medieval winter, inequality is not abstract. It is physical. It settles into bones, diets, and breath. And as you wrap yourself tighter against the night, you understand that cold does not create inequality. It reveals it, patiently and without apology. Smell becomes unavoidable in winter. You notice it as soon as the door closes behind you and the outside air is sealed out. It is not one smell, but many layered together, pressed into a smaller space by cold and stillness. Smoke sits at the center of it all, clinging to hair, fabric, skin, and walls with stubborn loyalty. You breathe in and recognize the familiar mix immediately. Burnt wood, damp wool, old ash. Human bodies that have not fully dried in weeks. Winter does not allow freshness to linger. Everything absorbs everything else. And the result becomes the season's signature. The fire contributes constantly, even when it burns cleanly. It leaves residue. Soot settles invisibly on beams and ceilings, darkening them year by year. You can trace a household's history in the thickness of smoke stains alone. Winter deepens these marks faster than any other season. You notice how people stop reacting to the smell quickly. Noses adapt. What would feel overwhelming at first becomes background. This adaptation is essential. Without it, winter would be unbearable. Sensory tolerance becomes a survival skill. There is also the scent of food, persistent and muted. Stew that has simmered, cooled, and reheated repeatedly. Fat rendered slowly. Bread stored in sacks. These smells signal nourishment even when appetite is low. They reassure rather than entice. A less obvious element emerges as you pay closer attention. Moisture has a smell too. Cold dampness rising from floors, condensation forming on walls, wet straw pressed underfoot. This scent hints at discomfort before you feel it physically. Sanitation changes in winter. Water is harder to heat. Washing becomes infrequent. Clothes are aired rather than cleaned. Bodies carry the evidence. This is not neglect. It is triage. Effort is allocated where it matters most. You notice how people manage these smells pragmatically. Herbs are hung near doors. Rosemary, sage, or whatever remains from summer, not to eliminate odor entirely, but to soften it. The practice offers psychological relief even when physical effect is minimal. Records from medieval households mention the use of scented rushes and herbs, especially in winter. These were not luxuries. They were attempts to make enclosed spaces tolerable when ventilation was limited. Animal presence adds another layer. Manure, hay, animal breath. These smells blend into the household environment rather than standing apart. In winter, separation fades. Everything shares air. You become aware of how smell shapes memory. Certain combinations anchor moments firmly. Smoke and wool will always recall winter nights. The scent of damp straw will summon images of shared sleep. These associations deepen with repetition. Taste is affected too. Smoke infuses food. Ale carries hints of its surroundings. Everything eaten indoors absorbs the room subtly. This creates a winter flavor distinct from summer freshness. You realize that smell also serves as information. A sharp change signals trouble. Burning that smells wrong. Food beginning to spoil. Illness detected on breath. Winter trains the senses to notice these shifts early. There is discussion among historians about how medieval people perceived hygiene. Modern standards do not apply easily. Cleanliness was situational, responsive to environment. Winter demanded compromise rather than ideal. You notice that people associate certain smells with safety. Smoke means fire. Fire means warmth. Warmth means survival. Even unpleasant scents carry reassurance when linked to protection. As night deepens, smells intensify slightly. Air circulation slows. Doors remain closed. Fires burn lower, releasing heavier smoke. The room feels denser. Breathing requires adjustment. You shift closer to the fire and notice the change immediately. The smoke is stronger here, but the warmth compensates. People choose their discomfort carefully. Sleep approaches with scent as companion. Wool near your face carries months of use. It smells of smoke and sweat, and something faintly sweet from dried herbs. You stop noticing it consciously, but it anchors you in place. You think briefly about how modern life erases scent so thoroughly. Here, winter preserves it. Smell becomes part of environment rather than something to eliminate. It tells stories quietly, persistently. As you settle into rest, the layered winter scent surrounds you fully. It is not pleasant, but it is familiar. Familiarity breeds calm. Your breathing slows, adapting once more. In medieval winter, smell is not something you escape. It is something you live within, and as sleep draws closer, you accept it as part of the season's character. Another sense shaped by cold, darkness, and shared survival, waiting patiently for spring air to cleanse it away. Light never feels abundant in winter. It feels borrowed, temporary, always on the verge of leaving. You become aware of this as soon as evening approaches, and lamps are prepared with deliberate care. Every source of light here is fragile, dependent on fuel that cannot be wasted. A rushlight is trimmed carefully, its pith exposed just enough to burn steadily. Tallow candles are examined before use, weighed almost unconsciously in the hand. These are not decorations. They are tools. And like all tools in winter, they are rationed. You watch as someone lights a candle and immediately shields it from drafts. The flame steadies. then flickers. Shadows leap across the walls, stretching and shrinking as if alive. The room brightens slightly, though corners remain stubbornly dark. Light here never fills space. It punctuates it. Written accounts from medieval households show how carefully lighting supplies were managed during winter months. Tallow was rendered from animal fat collected earlier in the year. Rushes were gathered and dried long before frost arrived. Running out of light before winter ended meant living almost entirely by fire glow. You notice how people cluster where light reaches. Tasks requiring vision draw closer to the flame. Faces turn toward it instinctively. Conversation happens within its circle. Beyond that boundary, the room dissolves into suggestion rather than certainty. Light changes how time feels. With a candle burning, evening seems usable. Without it, the night presses closer, encouraging rest. This makes lighting decisions deeply practical. Burn a candle now, or save it for later. Use it for work, or reserve it for prayer or reading. Each choice reshapes the evening. A small detail catches your attention as someone extinguishes a candle earlier than expected. The wick is pinched carefully, not blown out. Smoke is avoided. Wasted fuel is avoided. Winter teaches precision even in simple gestures. Firelight and candlelight behave differently. Fire offers warmth and movement. Candlelight offers clarity but little heat. Combining them creates balance. Too much fire dims visibility with smoke. Too much candle drains supplies quickly. You notice how reading changes in winter. Manuscripts are held close. Eyes strain. Words blur in uneven light. Reading becomes slower, more intentional. Many choose not to read at all unless necessary. Vision is protected for tasks that cannot be done by touch. Scholars studying medieval literacy note that winter likely reduced reading frequency simply due to lighting constraints. Sitting here, you understand why. Light is not something to be taken for granted. It is something to be earned. Shadows play tricks on perception. Objects appear larger or smaller than they are. Movement in the corner of your eye turns out to be flame flicker. The mind learns caution. Certainty is reserved for what lies fully illuminated. Light also influences mood. Candlelit spaces feel intimate, contained. Voices lower naturally. Emotions soften. There is less room for agitation when the visual world shrinks. You sense how children respond to this. They stay closer to adults. Darkness beyond the light feels more pronounced. Night fears surface more easily. Comfort comes from proximity rather than explanation. There is ongoing discussion among historians about how medieval people experienced night psychologically. Some argue darkness was normalized. Others suggest it carried persistent unease. Watching how carefully light is tended, you suspect both experiences existed side by side. You adjust your position to stay within the glow. Your hands move into light when you need them, then retreat into shadow when rest returns. This movement becomes habitual. Light dictates posture. As the evening deepens, candles burn lower, wicks shorten. Someone trims one again, coaxing a few more minutes from it. The flame grows smaller, but steadier. Efficiency replaces brightness. You notice that prayers and quiet reflection often coincide with candle use. Light frames these moments, giving them focus. Darkness beyond the flame feels like boundary rather than threat. When the last candle is extinguished, the change feels immediate. The room does not become completely dark. Fire embers remain, but clarity vanishes. Faces become outlines. Movement slows further. You feel your body respond automatically. Eyes relax. Shoulders drop, without light to stimulate attention. Rest approaches naturally. Winter uses darkness as a signal rather than an obstacle. Sleep preparation begins without announcement. Cloaks are adjusted. Bedding is arranged. Fire is banked carefully. These actions unfold in low light, guided by memory rather than sight. As you settle down, you reflect briefly on how light shapes winter life here. It controls work, social interaction, and rest. It is never wasted. It is never abundant. In medieval winter, light is not background. It is presence. And as it fades gently, leaving you wrapped in shadow and warmth held imperfectly, you let your thoughts dim with it, allowing night to take its place without resistance. Winter weather is never just weather. It arrives with meaning attached, layered carefully onto cloud and frost and wind. You feel this the moment someone looks up at the sky and falls silent. A glance becomes interpretation. A change in wind becomes message. Snow does not fall here as a neutral event. It is read. Heavy snow suggests testing. Light snow suggests mercy. Rain in winter feels like punishment. Soaking clothes. Turning paths to sludge. Draining heat relentlessly. Each form carries implication. You step outside briefly and feel the air on your face. It is sharp, dry, and still. Someone nearby murmurs that this kind of cold is easier. Clear skies mean frozen ground rather than mud. Cold hurts, but it behaves predictably. People prefer predictable hardship to uncertain struggle. Weather shapes moral language in winter. A harsh storm becomes a reminder. A mild spell becomes a gift. Sermons draw on these moments readily. Weather is framed as instruction, not accident. Written sermons from medieval England often linked winter hardship to spiritual testing. Cold purified, hunger humbled, survival proved worthiness. Whether people believed this fully mattered less than how it helped them endure. You notice how weather forecasts travel without instruments. Elders study the sky at dusk. They note cloud movement, wind direction, the smell of air. Experience replaces measurement. Accuracy varies, but attention remains constant. A subtle habit appears as someone marks the doorway with a small sign after a sudden change in weather. Protection is renewed. Old rituals resurface when the environment feels unstable. Snow muffles sound, altering perception immediately. The world feels quieter, closer. Voices travel differently. Distance shrinks. This quiet can feel peaceful or unsettling depending on circumstance. You walk carefully as flakes gather. Snow hides hazards without removing them. Ice forms beneath. Puddles disappear. Winter teaches distrust of smooth surfaces. Rain in winter draws stronger reactions. People grimace openly. Wet cold penetrates faster than dry. Clothing grows heavy. Fires struggle to compensate. A rainy winter day drains morale more than frost. There is debate among historians about how medieval people interpreted extreme weather events. Some sources frame them as divine warnings. Others record them simply as hardship. Likely both views existed simultaneously. Shifting with context, you notice how people respond communally to severe weather. Work pauses. Assistance increases. Fires are shared. Winter storms compress community inward, both physically and emotionally. Weather also reshapes planning. A sudden thaw threatens stores. Meltwater seeps into buildings. Refreezing cracks stone and wood. People adjust routines rapidly, responding rather than resisting. You hear mention of past winters frequently now. Comparisons offer comfort. This storm is not as bad as that one. This cold has been endured before. Memory becomes insulation. You feel your own mood respond to weather without conscious thought. Grey skies, slow thinking. Sunlight, even weak, lifts it. Winter light feels precious because it is rare. Animals react before humans do. They grow restless ahead of storms. Their behavior is watched closely. A sudden silence among birds draws comment. Weather is anticipated through observation, not data. Weather also shapes time perception. Storm days feel longer. Clear days feel shorter. The rhythm of winter stretches and compresses unpredictably. You return indoors as snow thickens. The sound of it on the roof is soft. Persistent. Inside feels smaller now, more enclosed. Firelight contrasts sharply with white brightness outside. People speak more quietly during snowfall. Voices lower naturally. Snow invites introspection. Activity slows without instruction. As night approaches, the storm strengthens. Wind pushes against walls. Snow piles against doors. Preparations are made calmly. Extra wood brought inside. Food checked. Water protected from freezing. There is fear beneath this calm, but it is managed. Panic wastes energy. Winter discourages dramatics. You settle near the hearth again, listening to weather assert itself beyond the walls. The house responds with creaks and sighs. These sounds are familiar, almost comforting. Weather in medieval winter is not background. It is participant. It shapes belief, behavior, memory, and morale. It teaches patience through repetition and humility through scale. As you prepare for sleep, storm sounds blend into rhythm. Wind rises, falls, rises again. Snow slides from the roof. The night feels alive, but contained. You close your eyes, knowing the weather will continue its work without regard for human plans. In medieval winter, weather is never ignored. It is acknowledged, interpreted, and endured. And as sleep arrives, you accept its presence quietly, trusting walls to fire and routine to hold until morning. Waiting becomes a skill you did not know you would need. Not passive waiting, but attentive endurance. Winter stretches time in uneven ways, and you learn quickly that certainty is a luxury no one can afford. You do not know when the cold will ease. You do not know when light will lengthen again enough to feel generous. You only know that it will happen eventually, and that knowledge must be enough. You wake and check the sky instinctively, even before warmth or hunger fully register. The color matters. Pale grey suggests stability. Heavy clouds suggest lingering cold or wet trouble. Each morning feels like a quiet negotiation between hope and realism. Calendars exist, but they offer little comfort. Feast days mark passage. Yes, but weather ignores them. Snow does not care what day it is. Frost does not soften because a saint is remembered. Time is felt through the body instead, through stiffness easing slightly at midday, through shadows shifting a fraction later each week. You notice how people talk about the future now. Language changes. Fewer exact dates. More phrases like soon, before long, when it breaks. Winter speech avoids promises. Experience teaches caution. Food stores become symbols of time. A half-full sack of grain feels like weeks. A dwindling pile feels like days. You count survival not by numbers but by sensation. Does the pile look thinner than yesterday? Does the pot scrape the bottom sooner? There is a strange calm that settles into this uncertainty, once expectations adjust. Anxiety softens. You stop scanning constantly for signs of immediate change. Instead, you settle into rhythm. Wake, work, eat, rest, repeat. Scholars studying medieval seasonal life often note how winter demanded psychological adaptation as much as physical endurance. Without reliable forecasts, patience became a cultivated trait. Sitting here, you feel that cultivation happening quietly within you. You notice how people mark progress subtly. A comment about daylight lingering slightly longer. A note that ice melts a little faster at noon. These observations are shared gently, almost cautiously, as if celebrating too early might invite disappointment. Children ask fewer questions about when winter will end. They sense the answers are uncertain. Adults respond vaguely, not to mislead, but to avoid false hope. Winter teaches emotional restraint. You also sense impatience at the edges, a restlessness that surfaces when days repeat too closely. Hands fidget. Conversations circle familiar ground. Winter monotony presses gently but persistently. To counter this, small variations are introduced. A different story at night. A change in seating near the fire. A new task brought forward. These adjustments do not change circumstances, but they refresh attention. There is disagreement among historians about how medieval people experienced boredom. Some suggest constant labor left little room for it. Others argue winter created long stretches of sameness. You suspect boredom existed, but was managed through habit rather than complaint. Faith plays a role here too. Waiting is framed as virtue. Endurance becomes meaningful. Suffering gains context. Whether this comforts or constrains depends on the listener, but the framework exists. You feel time slow most noticeably at night. Darkness arrives early and leaves late. Sleep stretches. Wakefulness stretches too. Hours feel thicker, without light to mark them. They blur. Morning eventually returns, and with it, the familiar routine. Each completed day becomes proof of capability. You made it through another one. That matters more than progress. You notice how memory compresses winter. Days blend together in retrospect. Specific moments stand out. But much of the season becomes a single, long impression of cold, dimness, and shared endurance. There is also anticipation. Quiet but persistent. People speak of tasks that will resume, fields to be worked, repairs postponed. Plans wait patiently, stored like tools near the fire. Waiting changes the body too. Muscles maintain without growing. Energy is conserved. Movements become efficient. Winter bodies are not weak, but reserved. You sense that spring is imagined more than expected. It exists as concept rather than date. Warmth will return. That belief sustains effort. As evening settles once more, you sit near the hearth and feel a subtle shift. Nothing external has changed, but something internal has. The waiting feels less heavy. Familiarity breeds tolerance. You understand now that medieval winter survival is not about counting days until the end. It is about learning how to live fully inside the waiting itself. Accepting uncertainty. Adjusting pace. Letting time stretch without resisting it. As the fire burns low and the room grows quieter, you prepare for another night, knowing it will resemble the last. And in that sameness, you find steadiness. Winter continues, but so do you. Patient and persistent, holding on not to a date, but to the simple knowledge that waiting, done well, is its own kind of progress. At some point, without a clear moment of decision, your body begins to change its expectations. What once felt unbearable becomes familiar. What once demanded constant attention now settles into the background. This is not triumph over winter. It is accommodation. Quiet and gradual. You notice it first in small ways. The cold still bites, but it no longer surprises you. Your hands know how long they can work before stiffening. Your feet recognize when numbness is approaching and adjust instinctively. These signals no longer cause alarm. They prompt response. You move differently now. Less wasted motion. Fewer gestures. When you stand, you do it slowly, conserving warmth. When you sit, you arrange yourself efficiently, blocking drafts without thinking about it. The body learns the geography of cold. Breathing changes too. You inhale more shallowly in chill air. Exhale steadily. This happens without instruction. The lungs adapt to smoke and damp, tolerating what once felt harsh, not because it becomes healthy, but because survival requires flexibility. Food affects you differently now as well. Simple meals feel sufficient. Warm broth carries more satisfaction than rich dishes ever did. Hunger still comes, but panic does not follow it. You have learned the rhythm. You know when the next meal will arrive, even if it is modest. Sleep adapts in its own way. You no longer expect deep rest every night. Instead, you accept layers of sleep and waking, drifting and listening, resting in increments. Fatigue feels different. It is steady rather than sharp. Scholars who study seasonal adaptation often note that human tolerance shifts faster than expectation. Living here, you feel that truth physically. The body does not argue. It adjusts. Pain changes too. Stiff joints ache. but the ache becomes predictable. Predictability reduces distress. You stretch when you can. You warm slowly. You do not rush recovery. Your senses sharpen in compensation. Hearing becomes more attentive. You notice subtle changes in wind and fire. Smell signals trouble earlier. Sight adapts to low light. Picking out detail from shadow. You realize that fear has softened. Winter no longer feels like an adversary waiting to strike. It feels like a condition to be managed. This shift matters more than comfort. It frees energy. Emotionally, patience deepens. Frustration still appears. But it passes more quickly. You stop wishing days away. You focus on what can be done now. This focus stabilizes mood. You see this adaptation reflected in others. Conversations feel calmer. Complaints fade. People respond to discomfort with solutions rather than commentary. Winter has taught efficiency of thought. Children show this change clearly. They play less wildly, but more deliberately. Their movements are careful. They accept limits without protest. Learning happens through imitation. Elders demonstrate adaptation differently. They move less, speak less, but observe more. Their experience shows in anticipation. They prepare before cold worsens. They rest before exhaustion sets in. There is still risk. Adaptation does not eliminate danger. It reduces surprise. Illness can still arrive. Storms can still overwhelm, but reaction improves. Panic diminishes. You notice that joy still exists here. Quieter, but present. A warm hand. A shared smile near the fire. A moment of sunlight on frost. These pleasures feel sharper because they are brief. There is discussion among historians about whether adaptation masked suffering or truly reduced it. Standing here, you sense both. The body adjusts, but hardship remains. Adaptation does not erase difficulty. It makes it livable. You feel pride surface gently. Not boastful, but steady. You have endured this long. You have learned how. That knowledge builds confidence. As days pass, you mark changes subtly. Light lingers a fraction longer. Shadows soften. Ice retreats slightly at midday. These signs are small, but you notice them immediately now. Attention has been trained. The body responds to these changes too. Energy lifts slightly. Movement feels easier, not because winter has ended, but because it has loosened its grip just enough to be felt. You prepare for nights with less tension. You know how to arrange yourself. You trust routine. Familiarity has replaced dread. As you settle near the fire once more, you feel the quiet satisfaction of competence. Not mastery, but capability. Winter has not defeated you, and you have not defeated it. You have learned to live within it. This adaptation will fade when warmth returns. Muscles will loosen. Sensitivity will dull. But for now, it serves you well. And as you close your eyes, breathing steady, wrapped in layers and habit, you recognize that this is the core lesson winter teaches. Survival is not about resisting conditions endlessly. It is about adjusting to them until they no longer dominate every thought. You rest now, not because winter is kind, but because you have become capable. There is a moment that does not announce itself when winter begins to loosen. It is not dramatic. No sudden warmth. No obvious shift. You notice it only because you have learned to pay attention. The cold still exists, but it behaves differently now. It retreats slightly in the middle of the day. It pauses before returning at night. You wake and realize the light looks different. Not brighter exactly, but more confident. It lingers just a little longer on the horizon. Shadows move more slowly across the floor. You feel it before you name it. Something is changing. The air carries a faint softness beneath the cold. Frost still forms, but it melts sooner. Ice retreats from the edges of puddles by midday. These signs are small. Easy to miss if you are not watching. But you are watching now. Winter has trained you well. People comment on these changes carefully. almost quietly. No one celebrates too early. Experience has taught restraint. A false spring can punish optimism harshly. Still, the observations are shared. The light held longer today. The fire was needed slightly less at noon. Food stores are checked again. Not with panic, but with calculation. How close did winter bring you to the edge? How well did you manage? These reflections are not formal. They arise naturally as people look at what remains. You feel a subtle lift in your body. Movement feels marginally easier. Fingers warm faster near the fire. Sleep grows slightly deeper. These changes are not imagined. The body responds quickly to even small improvements. Winter routines begin to soften. Fires burn a touch lower during the day. Doors open briefly, without immediate regret. The house breathes again. Just a little. Smoke clears more easily. There is talk of tasks postponed. Repairs that waited for light. Tools that will soon move outdoors again. The future begins to re-enter conversation. Cautiously at first. Historians examining seasonal transition note that medieval communities often marked the end of winter emotionally before it ended climatically. Hope returned in advance of warmth. Sitting here, you feel that truth settle into you. You also feel fatigue. Endurance has cost something. Winter does not leave without collecting its due. Bodies are thinner. Stores are lower. Patience has been stretched. The coming season will require recovery as much as effort. Children sense the shift immediately. Energy returns in small bursts. Curiosity resurfaces. They linger near doors, peering out. Adults watch them with measured smiles. Elders observe quietly. They know better than to rush. They have seen winters tighten their grip again, unexpectedly. Still, they note the signs. They prepare mentally for change. You reflect on what winter has taken and what it has given. It has taken comfort, variety, ease. It has given awareness, skill, resilience. These lessons are not spoken aloud, but they remain. As evening arrives, darkness still comes early, but it feels less oppressive. You light fewer candles. You sit farther from the fire without immediate discomfort. The room feels larger. Night settles gently now, no longer as heavy. You prepare for sleep with the same care as always, but with less tension. The body trusts morning more than it did weeks ago. You lie down and listen. The sounds of winter are still present, but they no longer dominate. Wind feels less insistent. The house creaks less sharply. Everything relaxes a fraction. You understand now that medieval winter was never meant to be conquered. It was meant to be endured until it released its hold naturally. Survival was not victory. Continuation was. As you drift toward rest, you feel gratitude. Not dramatic. Not overwhelming. Quiet. You have lived within the dark and cold. You have adapted. You have waited. And now, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the world begins to turn back toward light. Now the pace softens even further. You no longer need to hold each detail tightly. The fire murmurs gently, no longer demanding constant attention. Your body feels heavy in a comfortable way, settled rather than tense. Breathing slows. Each inhale is calm. Each exhale releases what winter asked you to carry. The cold still exists outside, but inside, there is steadiness. Familiar walls. Familiar sounds. Familiar rhythm. You let your thoughts drift without effort. There is nothing left to plan tonight. Nothing left to prepare. Morning will arrive when it arrives, and you will meet it rested. The long medieval winter fades into memory now, not as hardship alone, but as lived experience. Nights spent close to warmth, days shaped by light, quiet endurance shared with others. As sleep deepens, images soften, firelight blurs, voices fade. The weight of layers becomes reassuring rather than restrictive. Your body knows how to rest now. You do not need to imagine spring arriving. It will come in its own time. For now, there is only this moment. Stillness. Warmth held just enough. Breath, steady and slow. Let your muscles relax fully. Let your thoughts dim like a candle gently pinched out. The night holds you safely. Sweet dreams.
Hey everyone, my name is Michael Chen. I'm a history teacher currently teaching in Vietnam, and I'm the founder and creator of the Boring History Secrets channel. I wanted to make this short video to introduce myself, to explain why I created this channel, and to share the reason why I do what I do. For most of my life, I struggled with sleep. When I was a child, I had trouble falling asleep and would wake up many times during the night. The same thing happened when I was a teenager. And now, as an adult, the problem is still there. Over the years, I've tried many different things: meditation, doctor visits, medication, and all kinds of approaches. Some help a little, but nothing really work consistently. A few months ago, while spending time on YouTube, something interesting happened. One of my biggest passions in life is learning, especially learning about history and science, and sharing those ideas with other people. I was watching lectures and history videos, learning a lot and genuinely enjoying them, but I started to notice something unexpected. I kept falling asleep. At first I thought, wait, this is interesting. This might actually be a solution to my sleep problem. So I kept doing it every night. I would listen to historical stories, learning new things, and slowly drift off to sleep. And for the first time in a long while, I was sleeping really well. That's when I realized I had found something that truly worked for me. And that's when the idea for Boring History Secrets first began to form. At the beginning, this channel was just a hobby. I would research different historical topics: the Middle Ages, the Vikings, American history, ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, and ancient Rome, and focus on details that are often overlooked. The parts that seem boring at first, but are actually fascinating in their own quiet way. I turn those details into scripts, designed to be calm, slow, and easy to listen to. Eventually, I got some help. I now work with a video editor and someone who helps bring everything together: the audio, the visuals, and all the technical details behind the scenes. Then I started sharing the videos, and to my surprise, I really seemed to enjoy them. So I kept making more, and honestly, I truly love doing this. One of the best parts of this channel for me is seeing how much you enjoy the videos. I love reading your comments. I genuinely believe I have responded to almost every single one. I especially enjoy talking about history with you, hearing your personal experiences, and learning how these videos help you relax or fall asleep. Some people tell me the videos don't help them sleep because they find the topics too interesting and end up staying awake. But honestly, I feel like either way, that's a success. So that's the story of how this channel began. It began a real pleasure creating these videos. I hope to continue doing this for a long time. I also to keep connecting all of you down in the comments. If you ever wonder who I am and Boring History Secrets came to be, I hope this video helped explain it. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you continue to enjoy the video.